The depths of the Fallout mysteries and secrets iceberg? Let's go. Vault Boy's Thumb. For a very long time in the Fallout community, there was a constant rumor going around that the signature pose that the Vault Boy was doing was actually a way to measure if you were in the safety zone after a nuclear attack. And this rumor became so big that they actually included it in the Fallout TV show.
If they ever drop a really big bomb, I'm told us to hold up your thumb just like this. And if the cloud is smaller than your thumb, now you run for the hills.
And if it's bigger than your thumb?
They told us not to bother running.
It is claimed that if a person does this to a resulting mushroom cloud, and you can see the cloud from behind the thumb, you are in the radiation zone and you should immediately evacuate. But if you cannot see the cloud, then you are safe. And this rumor spread around the Fallout community like wildfire, and everyone seemed to believe it was true. But unfortunately, it is not true. This is not a way to tell if you are safe from a nuclear bomb, so if that ever happens to you, please don't rely on Fallout. But the series creator, Brian Fargo, actually had a response to this. When asked on Twitter, he simply responded with, "The Vault Boy simply has a positive attitude." Crashed Highwayman. Around Novak, you can find the marked location Wrecked Highwayman. So this has led a pretty popular theory in the Fallout community that Nobark Noonan from Novak is actually the Chosen One. The Highwayman is definitely one of the bigger pieces of evidence because, again, in Fallout 2, the Chosen One was able to get a Highwayman actually working, and that was his own personal vehicle. And the fact that you can find it not too far away from Novak with a trunk full of fusion cells, and countless other evidence such as that gun located in Novak, and the lines that reference the cave rats that Nobark says, led a hefty majority of people to believe that the Chosen One and Nobark are the same person. Are they the same person? Probably not. But, I can believe. Pat. Pat was canonically the Vault Dweller's significant other. According to interviews with Interplay, Black Isles, and Bethesda staff, it is canonically confirmed that the Vault Dweller was male, and Pat would be short for Patricia. But they did intentionally make the name kind of androgynous, so that way it could either be short for a male or female's name. So Pat could be short for Patricia, and it could also be short for Patrick. But like I said, Pat is canonically the Vault Dweller's significant other, and they were introduced in the Fallout 2 manual, which was written by the Vault Dweller that had their story from the moment they left Vault 13 up until they founded Arroyo. After the Vault Dweller returned to Vault 13 and was subsequently rejected, he ended up leaving and went out into the waste again, where he met up with a few friends from his vault. And quoting the Fallout 2 manual itself, "Over time, our ragtag group turned into a tribe. I fell in love with one of them, and we raised a family like all of our tribe's people. We founded the village beyond the Great Cliff. It is a secure home thanks to our hard work. We would send scouts back towards the vault to help others who thought like ourselves, but that slowly came to an end. We no longer head in that direction. I often wonder what became of Vault 13 and other vaults, but I never had the time to go exploring again. I taught the others the skills they would need to survive and grow strong, hunting, farming, and other skills to feed us, engineering and science to build our homes, fighting to protect what was ours. My love and I led the village and the tribe. The tribe grew and grew strong with our help, but all things come to an end. Our sons and daughters are now the leaders. I'm sure that the tribe will continue to grow strong under the leadership of our children. My love perished years ago, and not a day goes by that I do not think of Pat's face. I see it every time I look at our children. This journal is our legacy to them, to their children, and to the rest of the tribe. That is my story, and I'm sticking to it. The Wanderer." Iguana Bits. Iguana Bits are a consumable item that you can find throughout the wasteland no matter where you are at. And at first, you would probably just think that it's just pieces of iguana cut up and put on a stick. But oh boy, is it not. A man by the name of Bob Frazier, better known as Iguana Bob, made this item very, very popular in the hub in 2161. He owned a shop known as Bob's Iguana Bits, where he sold iguana bits and iguana on a stick. But eventually, the Vault Dweller would come to discover that Bob's Iguana Bits was actually meat from human corpses that was being supplied to him by Doc Morbid from Junktown. And it would seem that his secret never got out because the shop is still being run 80 years later by his son, who continues selling iguana on a stick. Now, Fallout 4 and 76 did kind of change up the whole naming and picture scheme, with iguana on a stick now referring to the meat skewer, which was known as iguana bits. Now, in the newer games, when you see iguana on a stick, it actually means iguana bits. But just remember, whenever you find some iguana on a stick and you see those little chunks of meat sitting there, just think of Iguana Bob and what you're really eating. Basin Creek Building. The Basin Creek Building is a location in the Mojave Wasteland that you can find just south of the West Pump Station. What's so interesting about this building is that the entire building itself is pretty much just an Easter egg. Everything that you can find exploring the Basin Creek Building actually happened to Obsidian's old office building. Things such as a car crashing into the building, the bathroom flooding multiple times, having a huge ant infestation, a rat dying behind a wall which caused the entire building to smell, and someone punching a hole in the men's bathroom.
There is a building, it's called like Brook Creek or something like that, or Creek something. It's south of New Vegas. It's south of McCarran, and it's a I'm gonna steal these. The building is full of a bunch of things that were from the old building that Obsidian used to be in. That was full of terrible things. So there's like a car, like there was a time where we had a car crash into QA. Like, I'm not joking. Yep. So the old Obsidian building used to be located right off the 55 freeway. And one day there was this big shake in the building, and a car had flown off the freeway and actually hit the side of the Obsidian building by where our QA department was. The bathroom flooded at one point.
Several points.
Several points. We had, it was infested with ants. There was a rat that died in the wall at one point, and it was in the middle of the summer, and it stank up the entire building. And so
serious punched hole in the men's bathroom.
Somebody punched a hole in the men's bathroom. So we basically made this area that it's an inside joke. It's basically the old Obsidian building. So people who played through it, who were from the old Obsidian building, got a lot of laughs out of that.
And as you explore the Basin Creek Building in Fallout New Vegas, you can find tons of references to the real life events. No horses. Horses are very interesting in the Fallout universe because we haven't seen any in games. You would think one of the best modes of transportation after a nuclear apocalypse would be horses, but we have really never seen any, and this has led a lot of people in the Fallout community to believe that horses have gone extinct. Now, there is no actual lore that says horses are completely extinct in Fallout, but they are mentioned in games. In Fallout 2, Ethelwright has dialogue that mentions the ready availability of jugs of fermented mare's milk, and a mare is a female horse. In the Fallout New Vegas comic All Roads, which was a prequel to the events of New Vegas, the NCR can be seen riding horses. Now, I know a lot of people might bring up the email where somebody asked Josh Sawyer about this and he retconned it, but I've never seen any proof about that. It's just kind of like a, hey, I said this, believe it. So we can pretty much just ignore that. So I wouldn't say that horses are extinct. There probably just are very few of them, because I feel like if there were horses, you would probably see them a lot. I mean, the NCR does have trucks and everything, but it's not like they have that many of them, and without proper roads, horses would definitely come in handy. So maybe one day we'll actually see some horses galloping throughout the waste, but as of now, we have yet to see any. Experiment NRT 0001. Experiment NRT 0001, or also called the Glow Leaf, is a consumable item in Fallout 4. The background behind this experimental plant was it was founded by a Brotherhood of Steel field scribe at the mouth of a river, and upon testing and hybridization, they eventually got a leafy plant with thick roots that surprisingly made an oddly good tea. Eventually, the scribe deduced that the leaf must have some restorative properties due to how healthy he felt after drinking the tea. But other scribes quickly suggested that no one should be allowed to drink the tea after they found out how addictive it was. Now, the reason this experimental plant is on this list is because it does resemble the Nern root from the Elder Scrolls series. Both visually look very, very similar, and both of these plants are found to grow near rivers. And this is just another piece of evidence that people use that the Fallout and the Elder Scrolls series take place in the same universe. Now, despite Pete Hines denying that this is evidence that they take place in the same universe, this has not stopped a lot of people from continuing to believe that they do. Fallout 3 gun spells. Because Fallout 3 was made off of the back of Oblivion, in the coding you can find a lot of references to spells, enchantments, and a lot of things very similar to that. This does not mean that Fallout 3 has any sort of magic system or anything, it's just because it was made off of the Oblivion engine, so there's a lot of coding that's going to resemble that. For example, an item with +2 to strength is enchanted, and a lot of special abilities would be referred to as spells. It's not anything too important, but it's still interesting nonetheless. The Ghoul Gene. Any human who has been subjected to fatal levels of radioactive poisoning may not die, but may turn into a ghoul. Instead of suffering organ failure and their bodies falling apart, they instead mutate and adapt to the radiation, resulting in immunity and an extended lifespan. Now this sounds good and everything, but there is a huge drawback, with widespread necrosis of the skin, lesions, and rot, resulting in a terrifying appearance that is akin to a zombie. But how exactly does this happen? What exactly turns people into ghouls? Is there a reason that certain people can turn into ghouls but not others? We've seen ghouls that are alive from the pre-war, and we've seen ghouls go through the ghoulification process almost instantly. And what stops these ghouls from becoming feral? Like I said, we've seen ghouls alive for hundreds of years that have yet to turn feral, but we've also seen other ghouls turn feral almost immediately. And because each game kind of changes the lore on ghouls just a tad, there really is nothing set in stone that tells us how one becomes a ghoul, other than a huge dose of radiation. So this has led a lot of people to believe that there is a specific gene or some sort of it factor that can turn certain people into ghouls and not others. And really that would kind of explain everything. If there was a specific gene that only some people had, and that gene was the one that could turn you into a ghoul, it would make a lot of sense. There really hasn't been much evidence to support or deny it, so I choose to believe it. The New Plague. The New Plague was an infectious disease that first arose in the 2050s within the United States. The New Plague would cause profuse sweating, unexplained contusions and swelling, and eventually terminated in massive external hemorrhaging. In 2055, Vault-Tec started to develop a cure for this new plague, in which they established the Vault-Tec Research Facility, which would eventually become the birthplace of the FEV, the Forced Evolutionary Virus. But before that, in 2073, Vault-Tec was contracted to develop a general immunization against biochemical weapons used by China, and experiments with this eventually led Vault-Tec to create the FEV, or Forced Evolutionary Virus. So all because of this new plague back in the 2050s, we now have super mutants roaming the waste, all because people got a little sick. The Divergence. There's a very common fan theory that the Fallout timeline and our timeline take place in the same universe, but due to one specific instance, the two universes separated and branched out from each other, so the Fallout universe could have eventually became our universe. Now the most common belief is that the fact that in our universe we created transistors, and in the Fallout universe they did not. And a lot of people point out that this singular invention is the point that we diverged. Which is kind of true because in 1947 is when transistors were invented in our world, and transistors were not invented in Fallout until the 2050s. So that could be a very possible explanation. But when you actually look at it, this theory doesn't really make any sense. Because there are plenty of instances before that where our timeline doesn't match up with the Fallout timeline, such as Lorenzo Cabot being born on March 28, 1835, Vim, a soft drink, being created in 1931, Vicky and Vance going on their crime spree in 1932, and there are just plenty more. So it doesn't seem like there was a specific diversion date, as much as it was tiny differences that continued to build up until the worlds were just completely different. But I still do like the divergence theory. I think it's interesting to think about how if just one thing would have changed, we would have been living in the events that were leading up to the nuclear war. Dunwich. The Dunwich is a multi-game Fallout Easter egg that's lore is shrouded in mystery and hints at a dark and supernatural force hiding behind the scenes. Originally a reference to Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft, it has now evolved into a story in its own. The main connection that you can find is between the Dunwich building in Fallout 3 and the quarry in Fallout 4. In Fallout 3, the Dunwich building is a decrepit, ruined office building located in the Capital Wasteland. Anyone who explores the building will find it infested with feral ghouls, and as you dive even deeper down, you will discover hallucinations and eerie whispers. Through many of the terminals, you can uncover the story about a group of workers who were exposed to an artifact which caused them to go mad and turn into ghouls. You eventually learn that the founders of the Dunwich Company had an obsession with the occult and were worshipping some ancient gods. In Fallout 4, you can find the quarry, which is located in the Commonwealth, and as you explore the site, very similar eerie phenomena will occur. And as you continue within the quarry, you will discover an ancient sacrificial site dedicated to the god Ugg-Qualthoth. I think that's how you pronounce it. Again, I'm sorry, I'm dumb. Now there is a lot more backstory about the Dunwich and the corporation and their overall obsession with the cult, but there's just too much to include in this little section of this iceberg, so definitely check out any of the numerous videos about this topic on YouTube. It's very interesting, and if you like all things occult, definitely make sure to check it out. Inbred Swamp Folk. This is another add-on to this list that deserves a whole video actually, but I'll try to briefly summarize it. The Swamp Folk are an enemy that you can meet in Fallout 3's Point Lookout DLC, and due to years and years of irradiation and inbreeding, and a hint of occult magic, they have turned out exactly how they are. Before the bombs fell, Constance Blackhall, who was Richard Dunwich's brother, used the book The Krivbekni to hold power over the Swamp Folk before the bombs dropped. And after the bombs dropped, due to the book's power, she was able to extend her life. And through all these years, she kept instilling these same bloody rituals throughout all of the Swamp Folk. But eventually, that book was taken from her, and that led to her eventual death. And after many, many years, the book eventually did find its way back to the possession of the Swamp Folk, where they continue to perform the same bloody rituals and chants that was instilled in their ancestors by Blackhall. They torture and sacrifice people to their death, and they will chant incoherently while they do these sacrifices in a misguided attempt to recreate the pre-war traditions. And that just scratches the surface of the lore behind the Swamp Folk. On the surface, it's just made to seem like, heh, a bunch of inbred rednecks living in the swamp, but when you actually look into their background, there's a little more to it. Randall Clark. Randall Dean Clark, aka the Survivalist or the Father in the Caves, has one of the greatest backstories out of any non-NPC character there is in Fallout. And I hate to keep saying this, but the lore and the story behind him deserves an entire separate video, so make sure to check out this video by Synonymous that goes in way more detail about Randall Clark's life and his impact. Because we can't have this video being 20 hours long, so I'll try to summarize it. Randall Clark was a former US Army soldier before the bombs fell, and after the bombs fell, he would end up losing his wife and his child. Seeking refuge out in Zion, he would spend the rest of his days there, doing whatever he could to help protect the inhabitants of Zion. Oftentimes, he would have to resort to extreme violence to protect those he thought he needed to help. And all while doing this, he doesn't look for recognition, he just looks for atonement. The entire time, he was suffering from survivor's guilt, depression, PTSD, you name it. And anytime someone would get relatively close to him, they would end up dying. So, towards the end of his time in Zion, he was a lone, brittle old man, still doing whatever he could to help those in need. Looking on the surface, the story is that of a badass man protecting everybody in Zion, but digging deeper into it, it's that of a broken man doing whatever he can to atone for what he thinks are his sins. Circle of Steel. The Circle of Steel is a branch organization within the Brotherhood of Steel that deals with eternal conflicts. The only known member that we know of is Knight Christine Royce. Not too much is known about the Circle of Steel, but Chris Avallone summarizes them as this: secret black ops, more stealthy tech ninja assassins, branch that we intended to introduce in Van Buren, and the branch was becoming unhinged through extreme use of stealth boy technology and causing fractures within the political structure of the Brotherhood of Steel. So maybe one day we'll see more of the Circle of Steel, but as of now, not really too much is known. TES-04 pole. In Fallout 3 and also in New Vegas, you can find a telephone pole that has the letters TES-04 written on it. This is just a reference to The Elder Scrolls 2004, the year it came out. There's really not too much of a deeper meaning to this, and it's just a tiny little Easter egg giving a nod to The Elder Scrolls. Dennis Crocker was Caucasian. Dennis Crocker is an ambassador for the NCR, and actually was originally intended to be a Caucasian male. But due to a recording mix-up, the black voice actor Emerson Brooks ended up recording Crocker's lines, and this really made it so his voice and his appearance didn't really match, and they ended up changing Crocker from white to black. And you can tell that this was kind of late, because in the collector's edition of Fallout New Vegas that came with a deck of cards, one of the cards, the 5 of Hearts, is Ambassador Crocker, but before the change. So here you can see what he looked like when he was white. Vault 15 Survivor Factions. Vault 15 was an experiment conducted by Vault-Tec. The purpose of this was to put as many people as possible with radically diverse ideologies all together in order to gain data on their interactions and potential failure over the next 50 years. And as the years went by, the vault conditions would very quickly deteriorate. Population control was not implemented, and the vault would soon become overcrowded, and correspond that with horrible living conditions, conflict was soon to be imminent. And in the spring of 2097, the situation finally exploded. The vault was finally opened, and most of the dwellers marched out stripping whatever they could from the vault. The Vault Garden of Eden creation kit would eventually be used to form one of the most prominent communities, Shady Sands, which as we know would go on to be the NCR. The rest of the vault's inhabitants ended up banding into raider tribes such as the Khans, Jackals, and Vipers. But not everybody decided to leave the vault. A small group of people decided to try to live it out in the vault and would stay there until the vault was eventually invaded and left to be abandoned. So Vault 15 can give credit for the NCR, but it can also give credit for the Khans, Jackals, and Vipers. The Codex. The Codex is a set of rules and tenets that the Brotherhood of Steel adheres to. Created by its founding member, Roger Maxson, the Codex contains text that formulates the Brotherhood of Steel's core tenets, doctrines, responsibilities, and its members, and other essential elements of the Brotherhood's ideology and organization. It also serves as a record of the Brotherhood history. One of the main duties of the Brotherhood scribes is to maintain and update it. Any of the Brotherhood of Steel members that should break their oath to the Codex will be judged by a council of elders that would eventually decide their fate. Pink Paste 2012 Pink Slime Lawsuit. Just wait, we'll get there. This relates to Fallout. But back in 2012, ABC News did a series about the quote-unquote pink slime, which is a meat byproduct used as a food additive in ground beef. And it's used as a filler and to reduce overall fat content in the ground beef. And as part of the production process, heat and centrifuges remove the fat from the meat and beef trimmings. The resulting paste without fat is exposed to ammonia gas or citric acid to kill bacteria. In 2001, the USDA approved the product for limited human consumption. But the product, when prepared using ammonia gas, is banned for human consumption in the EU and Canada. And in 2012, ABC News had a story that claimed that approximately 70% of ground beef sold in the US contained this additive. And later in that year, a defamation lawsuit was set up against ABC for false claims about the product, and they sought $1.9 billion in damages. And for the year of 2012, majority of schools ended up purchasing their beef directly from the USDA and did not know what was in the beef. And an analysis of the California Department of Education data indicated that anywhere from none to nearly 3 million pounds of beef that the USDA was serving to California schools was made with this pink paste. Now this translates to Fallout because Fallout took this and used it for a background of one of their locations. In Fallout 4, you can find the Suffolk County Charter School. And prior to the Great War, for additional funding, the school's principal agreed to implement an experimental nutrition initiative, the NAPP, the Nutritional Alternative Paste Program. Participation in this program required limiting food consumption within the school entirely to food paste, which was developed by Vault-Tec. And it was reported that after 1 week of this paste consumption, there was an increase in problematic student behavior and everyone started to gain a pinker complexion. And after the Great War, the building is mostly intact and has become infested with feral ghouls, who after many years of eating this pink paste have gained a pink complexion.
Good morning, teachers and students. It is a fabulous Wednesday here at Suffolk County Charter School. The Glee Club is having their seasonal bake sale today, so stop by and show your support so we can send our team to the regionals. Remember, actual baked goods are forbidden on school grounds, so they will be selling colorful cups for your food paste. Oh, also, we will be having a school assembly during second period tomorrow. on the dangers of strangers by Jangles, the moon monkey himself. Once again, we would like to thank our benefactors from the NAPP program for allowing us to have such a big star come and speak to you kids. We owe our benefactors strict adherence to the rules they have set forth. This is Principal Hudson, signing off. Have a great day. Happy Friday all. The NAPP program launched this week with success, but not without problems. I hate to have to throw away your mother's carefully packed lunches, but I am afraid we must put our foot down on this issue. I am assured all of you will get used to the flavor of the paste. Also, I have been informed that flavor varieties will be on their way pending continued success of the program. How exciting! To those complaining, I will repeat. There are absolutely no psychological or physical side effects from participation in the NAPP. Any observed effect is assuredly psychosomatic and possibly related to a lack of trust in the government. Remember, our participation in the NAPP not only helps our school, but in the long run benefits our nation. Thank you for your attention. This is Principal Hudson, signing off.
Original child killer reputation artwork. In Fallout 1 and in Fallout 2, you can get the reputation child killer. The reputation will display on your character sheet, but it will remain inactive until you kill at least 3 children. And the effects of this will make interactions with NPCs more difficult, and also random bounty hunters will start appearing on the map trying to track you down. And because you were able to kill children, this actually almost made the game impossible to release in Europe. Tim Kaine actually commented on this controversy in 2012.
Boom, we got an M rating. We didn't mind that. I think marketing was worried it would reduce the people who would be able to buy it. This led to the child killing controversy. We allowed it. We just said, look, we're going to have kids in the game. If you shoot them, it's a huge penalty to karma. You're really disliked. There are places that won't sell to you. There are people who shoot you on sight. And we thought people can decide what they want to do. There was a small problem with that, in that if you ever did a burst mode with a gun, you sometimes shot children inadvertently. This, of course, contributed to our M rating. However, Europe said no. They wouldn't even sell the game if there were children in the game. We didn't have time to read all the quests. What we just did is we just deleted kids off the disc. So things are there that reference children, but you never see any children.
So it's safe to say they were pretty out there for having the ability to kill children in their game, but what takes it a step further was the unused icon for the reputation. The creator of this artwork said, "This image was unused and the only Vault Boy image to ever be cut from Fallout 2. I'm sure you can figure out why. I remember when I got the request to do a perk illustration for Child Killer, that there would be no way to keep it from being offensive. I mean, really, how do you make an illustration of Child Killer and keep it from being offensive? Anyway, for some reason I thought this was the least offensive way to do it. I have no idea what I was thinking. Even the designer who requested it realized it was a bad idea, so we fixed it. Looking back on it now, I can't believe I drew this." And yeah, I gotta admit, this is pretty hardcore for an icon, but I mean, hey, the reputation is literally called Child Killer. It's not supposed to be a good thing. Fallout Van Buren. Fallout Van Buren was the codename that Black Isle Studios assigned to their next Fallout game, which would have been Fallout 3. And it was in development up until December 8th of 2003 when it was cancelled. And we know the story from there on out. Bethesda ended up picking up the Fallout IP and then actually made the Fallout 3 that we know and love. But the reason Van Buren is so well known in the Fallout community is because a lot of things from Fallout Van Buren ended up getting put into Fallout New Vegas. Things such as the NCR Brotherhood War, Joshua Graham's Caesar's Legion, the Hoover Dam, Christine Royce, and numerous other characters, locations, plot devices were all originally going to take place in Van Buren, but were later taken and used for Fallout New Vegas. So if you are a fan of like lost media and things like that, definitely look into Van Buren because it's pretty interesting. Talking Deathclaws. Now, believe it or not, there are actually some friendly Deathclaws out in the waste, and this can all be thanks to the Enclave and some experiments. The Enclave took a bunch of Deathclaws and exposed them to FEV, and this happened to boost their intelligence and give them the ability to talk. The Enclave had hoped that this would make Deathclaws intelligent enough to obey commands, but it kind of had the opposite effect. The Deathclaws actually grew a sense of morality and started to question their masters. And after the Deathclaws and the Enclave stormed Vault 13, the intelligent Deathclaws ended up leaving the Enclave and adopted the empty vault as their new home. And over time, several humans from around the waste would come to live in the vault. And you can only imagine how safe that vault would be with an army of intelligent Deathclaws protecting it. And the Deathclaws and the humans ended up living here for quite some time and were even visited by the Chosen One. But eventually that time would come to an end when an Enclave team led by Frank Horrigan, who is one of the strongest people in the Fallout universe, assaulted Vault 13 and massacred everyone inside of it. And after the events of Fallout 2, there is only 2 known intelligent Deathclaws still left out there. Gorus, who had accompanied the Chosen One, and Zarn, a Deathclaw kept in Navarro under the custody of Dr. Schraber. These 2 are just some of the last known intelligent and talking Deathclaws that are out there. So just remember, next time you see a Deathclaw charging at you, there is a more than 0% chance that it could be intelligent. Impossible Followers Good Ending. In Fallout 1, no matter what you do in the game, you will always receive this ending for the Followers of the Apocalypse.
The mutant armies, led into battle by the fierce super mutants, destroy the followers of the Apocalypse. Barely human carrion feeders pick over the followers' remains.
And that was because there was a bug that prevented you from actually completing the quest that would give you the canon ending.
The followers of the Apocalypse rise to become a major influence in New California. With your help, they gain control of the LA Boneyard.
There's a quest where you have to find the spy and the Followers of the Apocalypse, but the actual spy was cut from the game, thus making it so you can't find the spy, and therefore making the canon good ending for the Followers of the Apocalypse literally impossible. Institute Bird Spies. Walking around the Commonwealth, if you've ever gotten the feeling that you're being watched, well, you're probably right. The Institute has the Watcher Initiative, which is a surveillance program that spans across the entire Commonwealth. They use synthetic animals, such as crows or ravens, as observation platforms. And even in the Institute, we can find a bunch of screens showing video feeds that are really only possible if they were being done by birds. So yes, in Fallout, birds aren't real, the government's a lie, the moon landing was fake. New Vegas is the Wizard of Oz retold. This one sounds a little weird, but hang in there. So as you play the game on your way to New Vegas, the road that you take is very much like the Yellow Brick Road. Everyone tells you to take the road around Nipton, Novak, and onward to New Vegas. And once you reach New Vegas, you'll be met by Mr. House, who is a fragile old man hiding behind a computer screen, which is very similar to the wizard and the hologram. But the biggest piece of evidence is in Old World Blues. In Old World Blues, you are kidnapped from your home, and you have your brain, heart, and spine taken away from you. The whole point of Old World Blues is to get back to your home, so you would be playing as Dorothy. But you're also trying to return your heart, which is the Tin Man, your brain, aka the Scarecrow, and your spine, a sense of courage for the Lion. And to top it off, Dr. Mobius even makes a reference to the Wizard of Oz.
The X2 antenna can be used to focus your alpha wave frequency thought patterns. The sneaky suit? Why, it houses a cardiac regulator. And the sonic sound wave projecto emitter was never intended as a weapon. It was a medicinal vertebrae pulse desensitizer. In short, brains, a heart, and courage. Spine. I think there was a story once where a band of murderous thugs sought these things. They had them all the time in the story. Didn't stop them from murdering to get them. And it won't stop the think tank either.
So is it exactly a one-to-one retelling of The Wizard of Oz? No, but it's pretty similar. Fallout 2 TV Town Concept. During the development of Fallout 2, there were a lot of proposed story designs, and one of them revolved around a TV town. The town was created by an intelligent computer populated by androids based on the 50s and 60s TV shows of the time. and it was the envy of all of the surrounding settlements who all wanted a piece of its technology. And this is referenced in the official Fallout 2 strategy guide. In it, they talk about the concept of the TV town. The story can awfully vary wildly at this point from what you'll eventually end up playing. Our first story centered around an intelligent computer that had created an entire town of androids based upon 50s and 60s television shows. This TV town was the point of contention for the surrounding areas, who all wanted a piece of the town's technology for themselves. The ending to this first draft even included the PC going into space at the end. Mr. New Vegas is an AI. I have talked about this in a previous Iceberg, so I'll make this quick. Yes, Mr. New Vegas is an AI. It was confirmed in a Bethesda blog where they talked about Wayne Newton playing as Mr. New Vegas. Mr. New Vegas is interesting because he's just a voice on the radio. He has no body, he was created by House, so he's literally just a voice. He tells you what's going on in the world, he's always upbeat, and he has some very bizarre lines. So yes, ladies, unfortunately, you cannot romance Mr. New Vegas, he's just an AI. Pure strain humans. This is a term that was first coined by the Master in Fallout 1. This term refers to any human that has little to no radiation, essentially being pure and unburdened by everything that happened after the Great War. So think of majority of people that were born in vaults. The Master, who was originally a quote-unquote pure human, eventually found out that pure humans were giving him better breeds of super mutants, while majority of the other humans that have been exposed to radiation were giving him extremely dumb super mutants. So he set out to conquer every vault and get as many pure humans as he possibly could. In Fallout 3, while most humans in the Capital Wasteland are way too damaged by radiation to give anything but a very dumb super mutant, President John Henry Eden was able to create an even further modified strain of FEV. This version was able to kill any human with even the most minor exposure to radiation, while keeping pure humans alive.
My soldiers cannot stem the tide, nor can the cult you've come into contact with, this Brotherhood of Steel. Mutations like the super mutants and ghouls must be purged from our society, our world, before we can proceed anew. Where others have failed, I believe your father's work can succeed. Anyone or anything that has been affected by mutation will be eliminated. You will likely be immune, thanks to your upbringing in the vault. Likewise, the good people of the Enclave will be unaffected as well. I understand that you may have become sympathetic to certain individuals in your travels. Individuals this will eliminate. Please recognize that the fate of our entire country rests on this plan. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good.
And he even tries to get the Lone Wanderer on his plan, and should the Lone Wanderer accept, the Lone Wanderer, having not been born in a vault, would eventually end up dying. And even in Fallout 4, these pure humans is still an integral part of the story. The Institute needs undamaged DNA, and hence why they infiltrate Vault 111 and take Sean while leaving the rest of them as a backup. They needed that undamaged DNA to create their first synths. So even though pure humans aren't a huge part of the story and talked about a lot, it still is a very integral part. Sole Survivor is a synth. This was a very common theory back when Fallout 4 was still relatively new. People seemed to believe that the Sole Survivor had died in the pod and was replaced with a synth. And the first piece of evidence that I commonly see thrown around is that you can actually use VATS before you even get a Pip-Boy. And people claim that to use VATS, you must either be a synth or have a Pip-Boy. Another thing that I see constantly pointed out is that upon entering the Mechanist lair, when the doors are unlocked, the voice on the speaker will say, "No biological life forms detected."
No biosigns detected. Proceed.
And other really than that, there isn't really much hard evidence that the Sole Survivor is a synth. But it is still a theory that people constantly bring up occasionally, but for the most part, majority of people do not believe it. Glory isn't a synth. Yet again, going back to Fallout 4 and synths, there is a character called Glory who is most definitely a synth, but due to the fact that when she dies, she doesn't drop any synth components, this yet again sparked a bunch of theories that she wasn't a synth. Now whether it was due to an oversight or a bug that she never dropped the components, I'll never know, but due to this one little mistake, we have yet again spawned another theory and series of debates. Now, this one doesn't really hold much water, and I think she is definitely a synth, but it's still an interesting piece of Fallout lore history. Deacon's hideouts. Now, whether it be the Institute's birds or the Railroad spying on you, it feels like when you're playing Fallout 4 that someone always has their eyes on you. And this is definitely true for Deacon. At multiple points throughout the game, you can catch him spying on you.
What's up? What a day, huh? Everyone's welcome and good neighbor. Even me. Don't you have, like, important things to do? Welcome to the, Great Green Jewel. You'll totally love it here.
Hey there.
Nothing more to say. Sure love trading here. For trade stuff.
Hey there.
Nothing more to say. Nothing more to say. Nothing more to say. Nothing more to say. Nothing more to say.
And you can all trace this back to the second you leave the vault. As soon as you leave the vault, it seems like Deacon probably has his eyes on you. Right outside of Vault 111, you can find a little hideout with the Railroad Ally symbol, and throughout a lot of the Commonwealth, you can find little hideouts very, very similar to this. So, whether these are actually Deacon's hideouts for when he's spying on you, or if you happen to have yet another secret admirer, who really knows, but no matter what you do in the Commonwealth, somebody's watching. The Far Beyond. As you are clearing out Repcon of its ghoul problem, you can eventually run into the Bright followers, who is led by Jason Bright. And talking to him, you can learn of the Far Beyond. He claims that he's been having visions of it, and that it's a highly radioactive place that's perfect and safe for ghouls.
Hello, Wanderer. Please forgive us our humble surroundings. Our true home awaits us in the Far Beyond. Have you come to help us complete the great journey? I have glimpsed it only in visions, Wanderer, but what I have seen is truly miraculous. It is a place of light and healing, and I know in my soul that my flock will be safe there.
And other than all that, we really don't learn too much about the Far Beyond. And depending on who you talk to in the Fallout community, you're probably going to get a different answer on where exactly or what exactly it is. Is it just a metaphor for a better place, or is it an actual location? I've seen everything from Necropolis to the Glow to the Moon. There's just a million different answers for what exactly is the Far Beyond. But maybe one of the endings that you can get for Novak can kind of help narrow it down.
During the Legion's attack on Novak, Bright followers returning from their long pilgrimage assisted in its evacuation. Though Novak eventually fell to the Legion, many citizens of Novak were able to escape, alive and intact.
So it appears that during one of the endings, Bright followers coming back from their pilgrimage helped defend Novak. That would mean that maybe the Far Beyond is close enough to where they can actually make their way back. So that would mark off a lot of locations, such as the Moon, because how are you going to get back from the Moon? But it doesn't really narrow it down, and we may never know what the Far Beyond is, or maybe we'll get a little hint of it during Season 2 of the Fallout show, or the next game. Or they'll just completely forget it ever existed. Brahmin tipping. Now, believe it or not, Brahmin tipping is an actual thing in Fallout. Unlike its real-life counterpart, cow tipping, which is definitely not a real thing, Brahmin tipping is definitely a thing. In Fallout 1, a Brahmin can be tipped over by using a beer on them. In Fallout 2, you can tip a Brahmin over by using the push command on them, and in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, if you sneak up to a Brahmin while being unarmed or having your weapon holstered, you can quote-unquote tip over the Brahmin, which will make it go into a ragdoll state for a few seconds. And you can even do it in Fallout 76 during the Nuka World on Tour event. The spin the wheel has a chance of tasking you to find a Brahmin and tip it over, which is as simple as interacting with the Brahmin. So there's really no real applications to it, but hopefully you learned that this is an actual thing, because I definitely did. Dead Money Depressing Ending. Now this could be talking about one of two endings, I believe. There are lots of different endings for each individual characters, but out of the main endings, there are two other side ones that you can get. The first one can be done by siding with Elijah, and to do this you just have to have a negative enough reputation with the NCR.
In the years that followed, the legend of the Sierra Madre faded, and there were no new visitors to the city. Years later, when a mysterious blood-red cloud began to roll across the Mojave, then west toward the Republic, no one knew where it had come from. Only that it brought death in its wake. Attempts to find the source of the toxic cloud failed. The Mojave was cut off. Through the cloud, lights were seen from Helios 1. There were stories of ghosts immune to gunfire who struck down anyone they saw with rays of light. The last chapter of the Mojave came when a modified Repcon rocket struck Hoover Dam, releasing a blood-red cloud, killing all stationed there. All attempts to penetrate the cloud and retake the dam failed, and both the NCR and Legion finally turned away from it, citing the place as cursed. In the years that followed, the legend of the Sierra Madre faded, and there were no new visitors to the city. Only 2 remained alive in the depths of the cloud at the Sierra Madre, waiting for their new world to begin again.
The next one can be done by being a little too greedy and getting trapped in the vault.
The courier, lured by the promise of the Sierra Madre, could not escape. Once inside the vault, the casino did not let go. When the courier finally passed away, the casino created a new hologram to walk with the other ghosts that filled its casino. It was a pre-programmed homage intended for another. It assumed a new meaning in the likeness of the courier, a means of allowing even the dead to begin again.
And maybe it's talking about the cut endings where the courier also dies, one narrated by Elijah and the other narrated by Christine.
A slip of the tongue led to the courier's death. Unable to detonate his victim's collar from a distance, Elijah chose another method. The murder took days to plan and less than a minute to execute. Reprogramming the casino's ventilation system, Elijah turned the vault into a gas chamber, filling it with the cloud and killing the courier. In the years that followed, the legend of the Sierra Madre faded, and there were no new visitors to the city. Years later, when a mysterious blood-red cloud began to roll across the Mojave, then west toward the Republic, no one knew where it had come from. Only that it brought death in its wake. Attempts to find the source of the toxic cloud failed. Eventually, the last vestiges of NCR faded from the Mojave and the west, wiping the slate clean.
Christine's mission to kill the one who controlled their callers, even at the cost of her own life, trapped the courier inside the casino vault. The elevator door never opened, and no objectives appeared on the Pip-Boy screen to guide the courier to freedom. The Sierra Madre became the courier's grave. Not long after the courier's death, however, a new hologram appeared in the Sierra Madre lobby, standing, waiting to greet new guests to the casino. In some respects, the hologram of the courier paid respect to the one person ever to breach the Sierra Madre vault, a means of allowing even the dead to begin again.
Ron the Narrator. Ron the Narrator is an actual character in Fallout. Well, kinda. He is an old man with white hair, an eye patch, and some Legion Centurion armor. And he is used to narrate sections of the game, so when you are viewing slides, just off screen, you have this old creepy dude in some Legion armor, essentially whispering in your ear the events that are happening. They did this so that way they could actually narrate certain sections of the game. Now you might see a bunch of other people spawn theories here and there, but really it's just a workaround way to get voiceover. Riding Liberty Prime. So I really hope this is talking about this old Fallout 3 video where a guy dressed as Batman is riding Liberty Prime, and of course it's using mods, but it's the most insane thing ever, and it's like 12 years old, and I'm just messing with you guys. Of course this is just a piece of cut content. Early on in Fallout 3, well early on in the development of Fallout 3, they really wanted Liberty Prime to be way larger than seen in-game, and you were going to be able to ride inside of its head. Now of course this is not what we actually got, but it's still a pretty cool idea. Scrapped Rotface quest showed the dangers of Freeside. In Fallout New Vegas, there is an unmarked quest called Rotface's Loose Lips, and for one bottle cap, Rotface will tell you some gossip that he's heard around Freeside. And originally, this quest would have a bunch of different outcomes. Rotface was intended to buy a whole new suit with all the wealth that he got from the player character. And based on the response that you would give to Rotface, the next time you see him, you would have one of the following encounters. He would buy a gun and attempt to mug you. He would leave Freeside to seek his fortune. He would join the followers of the Apocalypse, or he would be murdered by a Freeside thug for his newfound wealth. So originally, depending on how you treated Rotface, it was going to have a pretty big impact on the rest of his life. But unfortunately, with a lot of other things in Fallout New Vegas, they cut this out. Reoccurring theme of lost body parts. I'm pretty sure this is self-explanatory, but it seems like you're always losing a part of you, no matter what game you're playing, whether it be Fallout 3, where you literally lose a chunk of your brain, or Fallout New Vegas, where you lose many upon many of your internal organs. It just seems like no matter what you do, someone's gonna take a little chunk out of you. James can't die in Tranquility Lane. During Fallout 3, as you are on the search for your father, you will eventually be led to Vault 112, and upon entering it, you learn that it houses a giant virtual reality simulation. And you will learn that your father is trapped in said simulation, so you hop in a pod and enter it yourself. And after digging around in the simulation, you come to learn that it's all just one giant plaything for this mad sadistic Dr. Braun. For years, all for his enjoyment, he has been torturing the people in this simulation. And eventually, you can come to activate the failsafe program, which will initiate a Chinese invasion. And activating this failsafe guarantees the death of all the original Vault's inhabitants. And even Braun himself says that if he wanted to let people go, 200 plus years sitting in a pod isn't really good for the skin.
Are you mad? I've been here for almost 200 years. My body is in no condition to be used for anything. And yet here in Tranquility Lane, I am as strong and youthful as I care to be. No, I think I'll stay here, thank you.
So the only hope that these people had was definitely death. But why during the Chinese invasion don't you or your father die? And that probably has to do with the Chinese soldiers' AI programming. They only target specific people, the original Vault inhabitants. You and your father were not a part of the list. You only entered the simulation relatively recently, so the AI doesn't take you into account. And since you guys haven't been in the pod for 200 years, your bodies are still pretty fresh. So as long as you don't decide to attack any of the soldiers, you and your father can get out with your lives. Fallout 1 Master Ending. In Fallout 1, you can have a Master's Victory ending by doing one of two things. One, you can join the Unity, or two, you can let 500 days pass with the Master still alive. And if you do either of these things, you will get this ending.
It is done. Vault 13 belongs to the Unity and the Master. Your knowledge of the Vault defenses saved many mutant lives during the attack. You personally made the final kill when you took the life of the Overseer. You will certainly become one of the finest soldiers for the Unity, and your skills will see you rewarded often in the future. You are happy. But there remains the tiniest doubt of what could have been.
Pariah Dog. Found in the special encounter A Lone Surviving Dog, the Pariah Dog is a very special NPC. As soon as you encounter this dog, you are going to be making a luck check every 10 seconds. And if you happen to fail this luck test, the dog will immediately join your party and drop your luck to 1. And because it's so nice, it will give you the Jinxed trait. The Jinxed trait will have higher chance that failures are critical for everyone around you, and have higher chance that failures are critical for you. So pretty much everybody is going to be having some bad luck. And if you want to regain the luck that you lost and lose the trait, this dog has to die. But here's the thing. The dog has about 750 health points, and will only run away in combat. So dealing with this poor dog with absolute horrendous luck is a challenge in and of itself. Vault Dweller and the Chosen One are male. It has been proven canon that the Vault Dweller is in fact male. He eventually went on to marry Pat and fathered Arroyo's future village elder, who went on to create the Chosen One. Now the Chosen One is a little bit more complicated, but we are led to believe that the Chosen One is also male. It is believed the Chosen One went on to do nightly activities with Leslie Ann Bishop or Angela Bishop, and with that they had a son, Mr. Bishop. whose daughter would also do inappropriate things at night with a certain musician from New Vegas.
Oh, well, that's all just a big misunderstanding, see? Mr. Bishop, well, he owed me a lot of money, and, you know, he's a busy guy, so I sort of figured I'd just take it off his hands. Robbed is such an ugly word. It's more like I took care of a payroll problem for him. Also, I might have, sort of plowed his daughter. A little.
So with all that information, we are led to believe that the Chosen One is probably male. Death of Sarah Loins. Sarah is a character in Fallout 3 and is the second highest ranking character in the Capital Wasteland's Brotherhood of Steel, only second to the Elder, which is her father. And shortly after the defeat of the Enclave, her father would pass away, and she would rise to become Elder to take his place. But one bad habit that she did have was that she liked to lead the Brotherhood from the front lines, and eventually this would catch up to her when she was killed in action. And after this one event, the Brotherhood of Steel would be in disarray for quite some time, but this did have some good because it would eventually pave the way for Arthur Maxson to rise up in power. And I'm not really too big of a fan on how exactly they handled this because she was a pretty big character in Fallout 3, and just killing her off screen like that and not really giving her any more story time kind of rubs me the wrong way. Ghoul Whale. Throughout the Commonwealth, there are whispers and secrets about a legendary ghoul whale named Old Peg. If you happen to be in Bunker Hill, you may pick up on a conversation between two caravan guards that might sound too real to be true.
So one day, my grandpappy was egging. It was a foul day, fog so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. He was stumbling along and then he heard a tremendous clamoring. From the ocean. Like nothing he'd ever heard before or since. He stood still for a long time. The fog cleared for a brief moment, and that's when he saw the outline of the great behemoth. Massive. Bigger than anything you or I will ever see. Old Peg. A giant blue ghoul whale.
Poseidon's rival Helios weapon. So I'm not exactly 100% sure what this is talking about, but because it is labeled Van Buren, I think I might have found it. I believe this is talking about the Ballistic Orbital Missile Base, or abbreviated as BOMB-001. This would have been a large, donut-shaped US space station capable of firing 24 nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles. It would have had one sister station, BOMB-2, along with another station, BOMB-3, but was never completed, and its parts were left rotting in a hangar in Bloomfield Space Center. This would have been one of the first space locations that you can go to in the Fallout universe, but because Van Buren was cancelled, we eventually did get that for Fallout 3. And because this is a giant space station that can shoot nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles, I think it is a pretty good rival for Archimedes. Now, one very interesting thing about this, in Fallout 76 you can find the crashed space station. And in concept art for the space station, there was originally a logo on the side of the frame that read BOMB-01. So I really love that even after all these years, we still keep grabbing things from Van Buren and trying to implement them into newer Fallouts. Point Lookout Dinosaur. There is a common Fallout myth that there are dinosaurs in Point Lookout. And this is kinda true. Near the coastal grotto on the east side of Point Lookout, just off the coast, you can find the skeletal remains of a dinosaur. And you have to remember, Fallout 3 came out a very, very long time ago, and the internet was not as popular as it was, so when people originally found this, they thought it was more than just an Easter egg. They thought there were actual dinosaurs in Fallout 3. Of course, we know that this myth is completely false, but it's still a pretty neat part of Fallout history. Teddy bears. Throughout Fallout games, you will find teddy bears located throughout the waste, and they always seem to be doing something or in some kind of weird position. Teddy bears always seem to be kind of behaving like they're actually alive. This has led a common myth and theory that maybe teddy bears are actually alive, but that's a pretty dumb theory, and the more acceptable one is that Wastelanders will scavenge an area and think, hey, this is pretty funny, and will set up teddy bears, mannequins, and the like in pretty humorous situations. So if there's one thing that you can count on being in a Fallout game, it's teddy bears doing something stupid. New Vegas Cemetery Whispers. I'm pretty sure I've talked about this multiple times on this channel, but If you head to the Good Spring Cemetery and you just listen, you will hear the creepy whispers of all the poor souls who still inhabit it. Bible Vault numbers. Now, I'm not 100% sure on what this is a reference to, but it has a little 3 at the end, so it obviously means it has something to do with Fallout 3, but I really couldn't figure out what Vault 87, 92, 101, 106, 108, and 112 had to do with the Bible. I looked around for a while and couldn't really figure it out, so if you happen to know, please let me know down there below in the comments. So with saying that, I'm going to go on my own little tangent here and say that this is a reference to the Fallout Bible and Fallout 3. The Fallout Bible is a collection of documents containing background material for the first Fallout game. As of today, the Fallout Bible is pretty much considered non-canon, but there is still a lot of information in that occasionally gets brought back up nowadays. And to tie this in with Fallout 3, there are 2 vaults that are only ever mentioned in the Fallout Bible and in Fallout 3. The first one is Vault 53, where most of the equipment was designed to break down every few months. While repairable, the breakdowns were intended to stress the inhabitants, and this was talked about in the Fallout Bible and in Fallout 3 concept art. The other one, which of course that we have in Fallout 3, is Vault 106, where psychoactive drugs were released into the air filtration system 10 days after the door was sealed. Now there are plenty of other references in the Fallout Bible to other vaults, but those were the only 2 that are strictly only in the Fallout Bible and Fallout 3. Kaga. Kaga was originally going to appear in Fallout 2, but was eventually cut, and he was going to be your arch rival. You wanted to save Arroyo, but he wanted to burn it to the ground. Arroyo did not just have a single chosen one. Kaga was the previous candidate cast out from the village for his evil deeds. And he believes you, the chosen one, to be the source of all the bad things that happened to him. He was intended to be a progressive character and encountered by the player character throughout the game. He would appear in a total of 5 encounters, and he would retreat from the first 4 and fight to the death in the last and final one. And his sole mission, other than killing you, was to burn Arroyo to the ground. Vault 77. The infamous Puppet Man Vault. Vault 77 was of course one of the many experiment vaults by Vault-Tec, and in this experiment, you only had one man sealed inside a vault with an entire crate full of puppets. Originally sealed inside on October 23rd of 2077, originally the Puppet Man thought this to be some sort of mistake or cruel joke, and as he wailed and wailed on the vault door, it slowly dawned on him that he was the only one here and continued to endure the years and years of solitude. On February 4th, 2079, the Puppet Man found a crate of hand puppets and immediately began playing with them. With his mind slowly going out of the years of solitude, he quickly lost himself in his puppet games. And by March 30th, he started to believe that the Vault Boy puppet was actually talking to him. That night, the King puppet would find itself being torn apart, and the Puppet Man would accuse the Vault Boy puppet of doing it. But the Vault Boy puppet would respond that it was actually the Puppet Man who had murdered the King. And fearing what the other puppets might do to him and the Vault Boy puppet decided to make their escape. And after years and years of living in the waste, a sort of mystique, a rumor around this mysterious Puppet Man would slowly start to grow and strike fear in all those who hear it. And by the time of 2277, even Paradise Falls, who is full of slavers, find themselves cowering in fear at the mere sight of a Vault 77 jumpsuit, and were even hesitant to actually burn it, lest they experience the wrath of the Puppet Man.
Like I told you, man, I don't fucking know where it came from, but it freaks the boys out. Some story from a while back about a stranger with no name. Just get rid of the damn thing. Ain't no good gonna come from keeping it around. Besides, if it is his, maybe he'll come back for it. Comprende?
Christine is Veronica's lost love. Traveling the waste with Veronica, you can slowly piece together her background, and you eventually learn that she was in love at one point in her life. But due to the fact that her and her love were both women, and the fact that the Brotherhood of Steel highly frowns upon that, they were eventually separated by Father Elijah.
Ever been nosy? I was, once. We were pretty young, but I like to think it was love. She left the Brotherhood. Wanted to put some distance between herself and her parents. Since our membership isn't open to outsiders, some members think that obligates all of us to procreate. You can guess which camp her parents belong to. No. Couldn't bring myself to leave everyone else behind. Couldn't convince her to stay, either. I'd hoped love would be enough to influence her decision, but it wasn't. We were both too stubborn. I don't know where she is now, but I'm sure she's moved on. I still think about her, though. Once in a while.
Christine would eventually be cut off with Veronica, and Veronica, being none the wiser, thought that she had merely just left the Brotherhood permanently. But Christine did not actually leave the Brotherhood and instead joined the Circle of Steel. And later on, when Elijah would desert his chapter during Operation Sunburst, she was ordered by the Circle to track him down and kill him. And that is how she found her way to the Sierra Madre. And talking with Christine at the Sierra Madre, you can slowly piece together parts of her background. Now, both Veronica and Christine never come outright and say that Christine was the one I loved and Veronica was the one I loved, and nor can you tell either one about it. And the main reason for that was because they had already done all their VO work for Veronica, and trying to get Felicia Day back into the studio would just cost them way too much extra money that they didn't have. And this theory has been confirmed multiple times by Josh Sawyer. At one point, Josh was asked, "Hi Josh, my question is about Fallout New Vegas and the DLC Dead Money. I have to admit, after reading Christine and running as fast as I could to Veronica to explain my experience in the world, I was disheartened to only give her a holotape from her previous elder, and not get a reaction from her about who I assumed to be her previous lover. Was there ever going to be a dialogue option about them? I guess I'm asking for closure." I cannot speak for Chris Avallone, who wrote and directed Dead Money, but I believed we were very limited by time/scheduling. Veronica was written and recorded for the base New Vegas game, with only a few hooks for Dead Money. I think reactions to Dead Money content itself would have required a more comprehensive level of advanced planning, i.e. we would have needed to know exactly what Veronica was reacting to in Dead Money at the time that we recorded her for New Vegas. Either that, or we would have needed to book Felicia Day for more studio time during the development of Dead Money. That can also be difficult and expensive, especially since voice actors and studio time are generally booked in multiple hour blocks. It's difficult to justify if the character was only saying 2 or 3 new lines. It also gets a little messy when trying to decide where to draw the line. I think a lot of people would love to see some resolution between Christine and Veronica. But what about Caesar responding to the events of Honest Hearts? I wrote Joshua Graham and directed Honest Hearts, so I can speak more definitively about that. The limited reactivity Caesar could have about Joshua Graham and Honest Hearts wouldn't really justify the expense of bringing John Doman back into the studio. And of course, the new dialogue, minor as it might be, would still need to be tested. Caesar had one of the most complex dialogues in New Vegas, so it's something we really tried to avoid messing with once the game shipped. I know that might seem a little silly, but because recording expenses can be high and recording sessions typically happen late in development, it's often safer to err on the side of caution. So what that transpires to is, because of limitations, they couldn't have characters reference each other, and because that storyline arc for Veronica was written separately and much later down the line, they really couldn't have it interact too much. And it is a shame that Christine's fate is to be tied to the Sierra Madre, and you can never tell Veronica that her love is still out there and misses her dearly. Maybe one day in the next Fallout, we'll get a hint that Veronica made her way to the Sierra Madre, and at last got to reignite with her long-lost love. Can't Eat Baby Marie. This would be a throwback to like a 14-year-old video of Fallout 3 called Fallout 3 Baby Eating, where during the Pit DLC in Fallout 3, he had the option to eat the baby, which is not actually an option, but back in the day, people weren't as internet savvy as they were nowadays. Edible Brain. In the Omicron DLC, there was a cut consumable item called Brain. This item would have been a literal brain by the looks of it, and would have gave you +2 to intelligence and -1 to endurance. Why this was cut, I have no idea, but I'm kind of glad it was. I don't really want my character dicking around in the Commonwealth eating brains. It's just not good. Let's just not do that. New Vegas medical history. This could mean a numerous amount of things. Like, this doesn't really narrow it down, so I'm gonna pick a couple and just wing it. This may be referring to Pacer's medical history. You can eventually learn that Pacer does have a heart problem, and you can use this to your advantage to take him out for the NCR. This could also be a reference to the numerous evaluations that the doc gives you when he wants to learn more about your history, one of them being a psych evaluation, and depending on your answers, if you give some more degenerate answers, he will have some very unique responses.
Sometimes when you give tests like this, you learn more than you was hoping for, and I reckon that ain't always the best thing. But I guess maybe it explains a thing or two about your predicament.
Now, this could also be a reference to a piece of cut content. Originally, your medical history was going to be you filling out a sheet, and this would have determined your traits, but as we know, that is not done, and it's done in the menu in the game, but maybe the medical history is just a reference to this piece of cut content. Kasumi is a human. Kasumi Nakano is a refuge in Arcadia in the year of 2287, who is led to believe that she is a synth who has replaced the real Kasumi. She really doesn't have any evidence that she is a synth, other than the fact that the only real memory that she has is waking up in a white room, and feeling a jolt of electricity on the back of her head while being stared at by mysterious people.
Listen, do you have any proof that you're actually a synth?
Little things. Dreams of waking up in a lab. Years I can't remember from when I was a kid. Not to mention how I never quite fit in back at home.
And other than those memories, there really isn't any evidence to suggest that she is a synth. When killed, she does not drop any synth components, and when talking to the Institute scientist about her, they say that there's no synth with that personality that they know of.
There's still the issue of this girl, Kasumi. She thinks she's a synth.
I can tell you that she's not one of ours. I mean, if she's a synth, obviously she belongs to the Institute, but I have no record of an asset deployed with that identity. I suppose it's possible that someone else meddled with Institute property. Certainly wouldn't be the first time. I'm sorry, I can't tell you more. If you can verify that she's one of ours, let me know, alright?
So is she a synth? Probably not, but there's probably more to that backstory than meets the eye. Psychers. The term Psychers originated back in Fallout 1. After the Master gained his psychic powers, he wanted to gift this ability to his followers, so he did some experiments with FEV and created 4 successes. Those successes were Wiggum, Gideon, Lucy, and more. They were kept behind a force field and given psychic nullifiers to alleviate any suffering stemming from their ability. And the term Psyker may have started in Fallout 1, but it definitely did not stop there. In Fallout 2, we have Melchior, who can summon FEV Beast, and Hakunin, who is a Dreamwalker. In Fallout 3, we have Bloomseer Poplar, who can see into the future, and Professor Calvert, who is able to project his thoughts into the minds of others. In Fallout New Vegas, we got the Clairvoyant Forecaster, and in Fallout 4, we got Mama Murphy. So there are plenty of people in the Fallout universe who technically have psychic powers. I'm glad they didn't put too much emphasis on this, but just enough to make it interesting. Wanamingo Origins. The Wanamingo is one of the many mutant creatures in Fallout. There is an East Coast and a West Coast version. The West Coast version we can see in Fallout 2 and are mainly found in North California, while the East Coast version are going to be slightly different and found throughout Appalachia. And not too much is really known about their origins. But in Fallout 2, the Wanamingos were originally tied to a bunch of cut content. specifically a cut EPA location. Or, well, that's what its earlier version was called. It was eventually renamed to the Environmental Protection Agency. And originally, there was a heavily toxic lake that was explicitly mentioned as being a catalyst for many mutations, including things like the floaters and centaurs. So maybe early on in Fallout 2's development, this would have been the origins for the Wanamingos. Also in the Fallout Bible, which I should say again is non-canon, but in the Fallout Bible, Chris Avalon, who did not really like the idea of the Wanamingos, specifically states that they are a product of pre-war FEV experiments, and tended to be a genetically engineered creature that would be unleashed in enemy territory, with an unusually long but not infinite lifespan. And they even put a genetic dead man switch in them to keep them from excessively breeding. And it seems like for Fallout 3, they were at least toying around with the idea of having them in, because in some of the concept art for Fallout 3, we can see some mock drawings for the Wanamingos. So what is the origins of these creatures? We don't really know 100%, but there are still many theories out there. Vault Zero. Vault Zero is a location in Fallout Tactics, which is otherwise known as the Calculator's Lair, that can be reached from Cheyenne Mountain. And unlike most vaults that had an experiment, Vault Zero was not that. It was dug deep beneath the Cheyenne Mountain and was by far one of the largest underground vaults, and was intended to be the epicenter of the Vault network. Vault Zero was the place where all the geniuses of the pre-war United States would be kept in cryogenic stasis. Their brains were to be extracted and frozen for the duration of their stay in the vault, and they were all hooked up together to one big supercomputer called the Calculator. And due to budget cutbacks by the Department of Defense, several important backup systems were not included in the Neuralink systems. This caused the Calculator to become corrupted, and instead of releasing robots to help make the way safer for humanity, the robots began exterminating all life. And all the geniuses that were still plugged in, majority of them suffered brain damage, dementia, and cognitive defects from a combination of old age and prolonged exposure to radiation. And during the game of Fallout Tactics, Vault Zero would serve as the end-game setting, where the player character and a team of Brotherhood of Steel Paladins would fight their way to the Calculator's chamber. Now, Fallout Tactics, I guess, would technically be considered a spin-off series, so take all that with what you will. Bill Calhoun. When you think of Caesar's Legion, the first names that probably come to mind are Caesar, Joshua Graham, Legate Linnaeus, something like that. But Bill Calhoun probably isn't one of them. Bill was one of the followers that were sent east to study the dialects of the tribes found in the region around the Grand Canyon, where he was partnered with Edward Salo, who is, as we know, Caesar. On their journey, that's when they would meet the Mormon missionary Joshua Graham. After reaching the Grand Canyon, the three of them would have peaceful discussions with the Blackfoot tribe, until Graham would make a mistranslation and incite the Blackfoots, resulting in them being captured and held for ransom. But during all of this time, the tribe was at war with 7 other tribes, and they were ultimately going to lose. And Caesar, not willing to get destroyed along with them, and against his wishes of his companions, used his knowledge and education under the followers to train this tribe. And with all of his knowledge, he would very quickly rise through the ranks and become their leader. And soon after this, he would form the Legion with Joshua Graham. But instead of killing Calhoun, Caesar let him live and sent him back to the followers to inform them of the recent events, and to warn them to not interfere with the expansion of his new empire. And really the only other depiction that we get of Bill Calhoun is on the Legion money. On the denarius, one side has a bust of Caesar, while the other one will picture Caesar, Joshua, and Bill. So even though he wasn't a direct founder of the Legion, he definitely played a hand in it. Ghost in Baja. I believe we've talked about this in a previous Iceberg, so I will make this quick. When talking to Ranger Hanlon, he will throw out this line.
It's no secret we've had better campaigns. Holding this whole length of river isn't easy. We're stretched thin and the long 15 just keeps getting longer. Slow to get supplies, slower to get reinforcements. NCR's Senate has got funds tied up at the boneyard. And President Kimball ordered our most experienced rangers to chase ghosts down at Baja.
And this led a lot of people to believe that rangers were chasing like actual ghosts or some sort of mysterious figure out in Baja, when he obviously just meant that they were chasing like dead ends in Baja, but that's still not going to stop the Fallout community from doing its thing. Lost Fort Abandoned Design Docs. The Fort abandoned design docs were from Fallout Van Buren, which as we know was eventually cancelled, and these docs were written by Chris Avallone and outline the content which would have appeared in Fort Abandon. And these documents were anonymously given to a Fallout historian, I hope I pronounced his name right, Anna Charit? Anna? I'm just gonna call her Anna. With the request that she publish it to the Nukipedia on November 9th, 2023. On April 3rd of the following year, she took all the documents down, citing it was a request by those who had originally given her permission. But once something has been on the internet, it is always on the internet. And using the Wayback Machine, we can still find some images of these leaked documents. Fort Abandon, originally known as Fort Aradesh, was a destroyed military base that belonged to the NCR. The fort was destroyed by Caesar's Legion forces, reducing the Republic's control over the frontier. And the name Fort Abandon was applied to it after the NCR withdrew its forces. And the original plan was to have the player character, if they choose so, to slowly upgrade the fort into a center of prosperity. And in New Vegas' Lonesome Road, we can actually get a reference to this fort.
I've walked the east. You've walked the west. More than I have. Circle Junction, Reno, Vault City. Word of you at Fort Aradesh. Fort Abandon. Even further west than that. Brahmin drives on the big circle.
Pam caused the Great War. One of the many questions in the Fallout universe is who exactly caused the Great War? There are so many theories floating around, but there's really no 100% definite answer on who exactly caused it. And I kind of like that. I like having the mystery. I don't really ever want to know who caused it because I feel like, in my opinion, it would kind of break the whole meaning of Fallout. But one of the many theories floating around is that Pam, the predictive analytic machine that is currently being used by the Railroad, actually caused the Great War. Pam was originally commissioned in 2067 under the PAM initiative. This was a joint project between the Defense Intelligence Agency and the military to develop an advanced AI, capable of predicting the future. And with access to a massive database, Pam was able to make some predictions. But she did have a problem with the human factor, and in a bid to remove the human element from her calculations, the theory goes that Pam might have actually fed the US false information about the impending nuclear strikes, which would in turn force the US to retaliate.
Just how inaccurate are you?
The smaller the group, and the greater the time frame, the less accurate I become. But all predictions are affected by the human element.
Now, did Pam start the Great War? I highly doubt it, but it's still just another theory to add to the pile. Far Harbor Sunken Power Armor. In the Far Harbor DLC, you can find a full set of power armor located just under the water. Now, unfortunately, this is just one of the many numerous Vault locations that have been cut. This originally was going to be an unmarked location that was going to be in the DLC, and it would have probably been a pre-war military crash of some sort. But due to who knows why, they never got to finish it, and now we just have a piece of power armor sitting under the water that you can't access. Colonel Autumn's Enclave. For a long time in Fallout 3, there's been a discussion on if Colonel Augustus Autumn was actually the bad guy. Colonel Autumn is the commanding officer of the Capital Wasteland Enclave in 2277. And a small minority of Fallout 3 fans have tried to paint Colonel Autumn as the good guy, or if not the good guy, at least an anti-hero. They claim that his motives were in good faith, and he was just simply trying to bring stability and peace to the wasteland. Even Colonel Autumn states that he doesn't want to poison the water with FEV, he simply wants to trade it for loyalty.
Once this facility is operational, the masses will flock to the Enclave for fresh water, protection, and a plan for the future.
He just wants to create law and order, and he wants to use the purified water to do that. And all of this is in direct defiance against Eden's plans to use the FEV to wipe out all mutated life, which would include contaminated surface survivors. So is Colonel Autumn the bad guy? Yeah, probably, but I definitely don't think it's as black and white as a lot of people seem to make it out to be. Multiple Lanai. This is actually one of my favorite Fallout New Vegas theories, and this theory states that there's not just one Legate Linnaeus, there's multiple. The term Legate Linnaeus is not to define a person, but mainly to define an idea, a symbol. And there is actually multiple pieces of evidence to support this. In the Legion camp, multiple of the high-ranking legionaries can give very conflicting details about the Legate's backstory.
Linnaeus is the greatest of my battlefield commanders. Some might call him a great man, but I'm not sure he qualifies. Once, he was the greatest warrior of the Hydebarks, a tribe of the Arizona. Maniacal in battle. Sometimes he'd ambush Legion patrols by himself. When after several months we found and surrounded the Hydebarks camp, their chieftain raised a banner of surrender. The warrior, who was not yet Linnaeus, went insane with rage. He struck down his chieftain and attacked his own tribe. He killed 15 before they brought him down. He didn't die, obviously. I had him tended to. He was maimed, most of his face torn off. It was days before he regained consciousness. When he did, I went to his bedside and showed him the helmet I'd had forged to cover his face. I said he could have it if he'd fight for me. He accepted, on condition that he be allowed to kill the surviving males of his tribe. I said, make it the adult males, and you have a deal.
He's the best warrior in the Legion. A full legionary by the time he was 12. He's never lost a battle. Had the Legate been in command during the Battle of Hoover Dam, the Legion would have won. I have no doubt about that.
It took years for Caesar to conquer Linnaeus' tribe, and Caesar showed mercy to the survivors, allowing them to join the Legion. Had the positions been reversed, Caesar would be dead. Linnaeus is called the Monster of the East because he never, ever shows mercy.
Linnaeus, the Butcher, Monster, Terror of the East. Not even his slaves have seen his face. Struck them blind so they can't. Wears a mask. Don't even know if it's the same man. He put Colorado to the sword. Broke the hangdogs by throwing their hounds upon the flames, so they might burn forever in the afterlife.
And a lot of this backstory has to account with no one really seeing his face. Why does he have the mask, and why would he strike his personal slaves blind so they can't see him? Maybe so that way no one can actually see his face to know that it's not the same person. And one of the biggest pieces of evidence is the fact that Joshua Graham claims to not know him.
I think only Caesar can lead the Legion. I've never met anyone who could take his place. I couldn't. I never had a mind for logistics. I don't know Linnaeus, but from what I've heard, he has no interest in leading anyone, unless it's in battle.
Despite the fact that all of these legends that were rising about the Legate would have definitely happened during the time that Graham was the Legate. And the thing that really nails it in the head for me is that we already have a couple references to the Princess Bride in Fallout New Vegas, with the rodents of unusual size, and the challenge, I am not left-handed, which is of course a reference to Inigo Montoya's line when he has a sword fight with the Man in Black. And if you haven't seen this movie, dude, check it out, it's actually really good. But in that movie, there is a character known as the Dread Pirate Roberts, and throughout the movie you hear all of these tales about the pirate, and you eventually come to learn that it is not one person, but it's actually multiple people. And as time goes on, the captain would hand down the title to someone else.
But Roberts had grown so rich, he wanted to retire. He told me his secret. I am not the Dread Pirate Roberts, he said. I inherited the ship from the previous Dread Pirate Roberts, just as you will inherit it from me. The man I inherited from was not the real Dread Pirate Roberts either. The real Roberts has been retired 15 years. Then he explained that the name was the important thing for inspiring the necessary fear.
And I think that is exactly what's happening with Legate Linnaeus. We already have multiple references to the Princess Bride, so why wouldn't they take another aspect from it? So in my opinion, there's multiple Legate Linnaeuses. They just pick the strongest guy, the most beefcaked guy, and throw him as the poster boy. You know what? This is true. This theory is 100% true. I just said it. Fallout 4 Neutral Ending. I believe this is talking about the Minutemen ending that has you coexist with the Railroad and the Brotherhood of Steel, while also destroying the Institute, but evacuating all the scientists and synths. So technically with this ending, everyone would be alive and coexisting with each other. Now whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up for you to decide. Gabriel was a failed synth mind wipe. Gabriel is a synth that, with a little help from the railroad, was able to have their mind wipe and start a new life. And that sounds good and all until you realize that ended up leading him to become a raider, and not just any raider, he ended up becoming the leader of a raider group. And the reason it would be a failed synth mind wipe is because, according to some Institute terminals, the mind wiping technique is very dangerous, and it can harm the synth software and mix up their ideas of right and wrong. So technically, every time the railroad mind wipes the synth, they end up with the possibility of getting the exact opposite of what they want. If you get a synth that is already generally a pretty good person, there's a chance that the railroad, while mind wiping them, could turn them totally evil. It really puts a spotlight on this whole railroad being the good guys kind of thing. Boone's Sniper's Nest. I believe this is talking about the sniper's nest that is located just outside of Cottonwood Cove. It has not been confirmed canon that this is actually Boone's Sniper's Nest, but a lot of people in the Fallout community tend to believe it is. The reason for that is because you can find a unique sniper rifle, the Gobi Campaign Scout Rifle, in a locked chest. And once Boone opens up to you about his history and the whole situation with his wife, it starts to make a little sense.
All right. I tracked her down. Southeast, near the river. They were selling her. Saw it through my scope. Whole place swarming with Legion, hundreds of them, bidding for things no man has a right to. I just had my rifle with me. Just me against all of them. So I took the shot.
Now, was this actually Boone's Sniper's Nest? Probably not. In Camp McCarran, you can find a note talking about this location. Major, this is to inform you that a small sniper's nest has been successfully set up near Cottonwood Cove as requested. The nest should have some bedding and a small amount of supplies, but no weaponry. The sniper should be forewarned that the position is close to the enemy camp, and upon completing his or her objective, should get the fuck out of there as soon as flamingly possible. The coordinates are 12-22. Good luck and good hunting. Signed, D. Leon David, Field Preparations Division. The pint-sized slasher was real. The pint-sized slasher was a pre-war child serial killing myth that parents would tell their kids who were misbehaving. The slasher was said to don a clown mask and appear from a dog kennel at dusk and chase any children who happened to be outside with a knife. And this myth was so popular that the pint-sized slasher was the second best-selling pre-war Halloween costume, right behind Captain Cosmos. And when you enter Tranquility Lane, you can even live out your serial killing fantasies by actually becoming the pint-sized slasher.
He is a figure of myth, born of old campfire stories. You will make him a reality. The residents will know you and they will fear you. When they have all been eliminated, return to me.
Now, to majority of people, the pint-sized slasher was just a myth. But if we head into the La Enfant Plaza and enter the Capital Post newspaper office, we can find this newspaper article. What American child alive hasn't heard the story of the pint-sized slasher, that diminutive demon in a clown mask who stalks and slashes the innocent residents of supposedly safe suburbia? It's just one of the many folk stories parents use to scare their youngsters into behaving themselves. Or is it? According to the Germantown police chief Joseph Field, the pint-sized slasher may be more real than many people would like to admit. After reviewing the autopsy results of the Linden Street slangs, we have confirmed that the force and direction of every knife wound are consistent with an attack from a much smaller assailant. A child, to be precise. Add to these sinister forensic findings this statement from Christopher Atkinson, the one surviving victim of the adolescent assassin, and it becomes clear that the pint-sized slasher does indeed walk among us. The clown, he's going to kill us all, do you understand me? He stabbed my brother Sean right in the face. He killed my brother, the little clown. Assuming the pint-sized slasher is indeed a real, tangible threat to the peace-loving residents of DC suburbia, one question remains. Why? What could possibly motivate a child to don a clown mask and murder innocent people in cold blood? We may never know, at least not until the miniature maniac is brought to justice. Until then, all we can do is lock our doors, kiss our children goodnight, and pray they live to see morning. Walter Streetbet Monroe. Vault Dwellers Memoirs. We talked a little bit about this with the Pat entry, But the Vault Dweller's memoirs were introduced in the Fallout 2 manual and are written by the Vault Dweller themselves, and it recounts their history from the moment they left Vault 13 up until they founded Arroyo. It has everything from their time in the vault, to their life outside, to their confrontation with the Master, to the death of his beloved dog Dogmeat, to his return to Vault 13, and to his founding of the tribe. If you're a huge fan of Fallout history, I definitely recommend you look into the Vault Dweller's memoirs, because it really does lay out the history a little bit better. Fat Man Bell. After you shoot a Fat Man launcher, at the end of it you may hear this little bell. Well, that little bell is actually just a regular lunch bell from the Bethesda Softworks cafeteria, and this is all according to a Game Informer article from forever ago. And because the fact that they used a lunch bell after you just nuke an entire area is absolutely hilarious, I choose to believe it. Slanter and Recree. These were intelligent FEV mutated raccoons that were cut from the original Fallout, and the only evidence that we still have of them is an excerpt FEV experiment disk that can be found at the Glow. Log date January 12th, 2076. With batch 11011, we have improved the mitotic cycle efficiency by 43%. We have infected 53 raccoons with this new strain. In addition to the now expected size increase, behavioral tests confirmed an increase in intelligence and manual dexterity by 19 points on the Shaluer Cap Index. Unfortunately, several test subjects escaped confinement and had to be hunted down and dispatched. Major Barnett ordered the remaining test subjects terminated. 2 pairs were unaccounted for. And it is said that after the escape, 4 raccoons managed to head northwest until 2101, when they discovered a small oasis that had amazingly avoided a great deal of devastation and began to regrow. Once they settled in the area, which would become known as the Burrows, their instincts would take over and they would become skilled hunters as well as becoming more intelligent. And they would officially call themselves the Slanter, which also means kindred. Now, the reason this was never put into the original Fallout was mainly because the creators just didn't think it would fit. Here's a quote by Scott Campbell where he says, "While Brian was often writing quests for our furry editions, the artist had a scope meeting about the number of characters in the game. We had more design than they had time to actually build and animate. So a compromise was needed, since the mutant animals were rare, required several sets of armor, and totally different animations, they were chopped. Poor Brian, he put so much love into those varmints." And also, Tim Kaine had this to say for the location known as the Burrows. "As for the Burrow, this location was written by an early designer associated with the project. While it was well written, I felt that its content was not appropriate to our Fallout universe, mainly based on its style and feel in the game, and not its artistic merit, so I did not approve its addition in the game, and that glow disc is all that remains of any reference to that area." Now, there is one more reference to this in Fallout Shelter. During a trivia challenge, the players ask what group worships the glow, and one of the options that you can pick is several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave. So maybe one day we'll get to see our hyper-intelligent raccoons, but I wouldn't look forward to it too much. Cafe of Broken Dreams. The Cafe of Broken Dreams is a special encounter in Fallout 2. As you are going through the wasteland, you will come across a small diner out in the middle of nowhere, and this diner will contain all of the different Vault Dweller models, and even some of the ones that you could not play as in Fallout 1, such as a black man or a female with red hair. And also there you can find Tandy, Set, and Dogmeat, which you will be able to get as a companion. And to do that, all you have to do is take off all of your armor down to the jumpsuit, and bam, Dogmeat's now a companion. But the funny thing about this is if you decide to attack Dogmeat, a man in a leather jacket will appear and start to retaliate. And this would be a reference to Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior. And even the name Cafe of Broken Dreams is a reference to a famous painting, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, which depicts deceased movie stars. So no matter what game it is, you gotta be impressed with Fallout and their references. Fallout Online. Fallout Online is a free-to-play MMORPG based on the original Fallouts. And as of today, there are a couple servers that people constantly play on, such as Fallout Online Reloaded, Fallout Online 2, and Fallout Online 3. And it's exactly what you think it is. It's the original Fallout 1 and 2, but online. And looking around online, there still is a decent amount of people playing. Nothing insane like thousands of people, but it seems like there are some small but dedicated communities still playing. Zaytans nuked Earth. Like I stated earlier in this iceberg, there are many theories about who exactly caused the Great War, and one of them is that the Zaytans, the alien race that we come across in multiple games, actually caused the Great War. And the biggest piece of quote-unquote evidence that people use for this is a holotape that can be found of the Zaytans interrogating a prisoner.
Our defenses consist of three battalions of light infantry, 34 pieces of field artillery, 108 armored vehicles, and 42 aerial vehicles. We have 38 ICBMs, always on alert. They're ready to fire when the word is passed down from the White House. The codes to activate the launch sequences are... No. I can't let you... Get out of my mind! The codes are... I can't betray... my head! I can't... I won't...
So a lot of people use this as evidence that the Zaytans had nuclear launch codes, and it looked like they were probing and getting inside this man's mind. So maybe they had an inside man who they had already mind controlled and just relayed the launch codes to him. Is this theory really credible? Not really, and I think it kind of just defeats the whole point of Fallout, that humanity is its like own worst enemy. And I don't really think it would make much sense if a third party caused the Great War. I feel like for Fallout, you kind of need humans to start it. You feel me? Camp Willow. Camp Willow is a location that is only ever mentioned in Fallout New Vegas. It is mentioned in the official Fallout New Vegas game guide, and the location can be found on early maps for the game. The official game guide reads, "Recently, the Legion pushed the NCR off the east side of the river at the Battle of Willow Beach, which destroyed an NCR military camp, and the Battle of Arizona Spillway. Day-to-day military operations at the dam are under the command of Colonel Moore. While troopers are active here, there are also a large number of civilian contractors who are trying to keep the dam running. They are a secondary concern to Moore, who is preparing for an impending attack by Caesar and a visit by President Kimball." And Camp Willow would have actually taken place pretty close to the real-world version, Willow Beach. So maybe in the future, after I have pretty much seen almost all of the real-world Fallout New Vegas locations, maybe I'll head out to Camp Willow and see exactly what went on there. Stealth Boy side effects. It is not well known, but Stealth Boys do have a downside. They are not completely harmless. According to Doc Henry, people who abuse Stealth Boys can develop severe mental conditions, such as paranoia, delusions, hallucinations, and even schizophrenia.
The Nightkin have varying degrees of mental instability due to their addiction to Stealth Boy use. I've been trying to come up with a cure. I'm currently investigating the local Night Stalker population, since they seem to have developed a natural stealth field. I've also gotten my hands on a working Stealth Boy Mark II prototype, but that experiment is riskier. I'd rather not pursue that research just yet. The stealth field has been modulated to use less power and thus last longer, but for some reason it has pronounced negative effects on the user. However, these pronounced effects will allow me to pinpoint exactly what parts of the brain they're affecting. Unfortunately, I'll need to run the test on a live subject.
And that's not all. If we remember back to the Circle of Steel, Chris Avallone summarizes them as this: secret Black Ops, more stealthy tech ninja assassins, branch that we intended to introduce in Van Buren. And that branch was becoming unhinged through extreme use of Stealth Boy technology and causing fractures within the political structure of the Brotherhood of Steel. So stealth boys on the outside may seem completely awesome. They make you invisible and harder to detect, but at the cost of your mental stability. Vault 8 and 13 Water Chip Mix-Up. The entirety of the Fallout storyline really comes down to a shipping mix-up pre-war. Vault 13 was originally meant to stay closed for an extremely long period of time, and before the bombs fell, Vault 13 ordered 420 extra water chips. And Vault 8, which was meant to open just 10 years after the bombs, had placed an order for a second GECK, a Garden of Eden creation kit. But due to a shipping error, the water chips went to Vault 8 and the second GECK went to Vault 13. So because of this, you get the events of Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 for them having to send the Vault Dweller and the Chosen One out into the wasteland. And because of their actions, you get majority of the Fallout storyline. It just goes to show you how one little mistake can have rippling effects down the line. Velvet Elvis. This fuzzy painting, and as the Fallout 2 official strategies and secrets guide would say, a genuine Velvis, is an item that you can get in Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. It is a framed portrait of Elvis Presley on black velvet, and in Fallout 1 it can be found in the alien ship Special Encounter, and numerous of them can be found in Fallout 2. But the interesting thing is in Fallout 76, Brother Scarberry mentions investigating a light which fell from the sky and finding only a fuzzy painting of a man in a blue shirt.
I saw a light fall from the sky. I hoped for him, but instead found metal, smoke, and debris. Nothing else except for a fuzzy painting of a man in a blue shirt.
The last cool thing about the Velvis that I could find is in the Fallout 25th anniversary, where a bunch of developers were answering questions. One of the questions was this. Speaking of content that wasn't cut, an interesting question comes up from time to time. That is, when implementing special encounters, aliens, the police call box, dinosaur footprint, did you ever consider them as anything beyond a cool little Easter egg, a more direct part of the story? Tim Kaine responds, "No, I don't think so. Special encounters were tied to luck and meant to be fun and a potential source for cool items. No story elements, since they might never be encountered for some players." Leonard Boyarsky commented, "Mostly we made those because we thought they were funny." And Tim Kaine adds on, "Although it would have been funny to convince the master to give up his plans using a Velvet Elvis painting as a bribe." So maybe one day we'll get to vibe master with a velvet painting of Elvis. Project V13. Project V13 was the codename for Fallout Online, and was being developed by Interplay by some of the original developers for Fallout. But because of the initial cost that it would take to create this, they never really ended up doing anything with it. And eventually, when Bethesda Softworks bought the IP for Fallout, one of the clauses for the purchase allowed Interplay to have the rights to develop a MMO. But unfortunately, there were some specific requirements that, if not met, Interplay would immediately lose their rights for the game. And some of these requirements were beginning development within 24 months of the date of the agreement, which was April 4th, 2007. Interplay must have secured $30 million within the time frame or forfeited its rights to license. And furthermore, Interplay would need to launch the MMOG within 4 years of the beginning of development and pay Bethesda 12% of sales and subscription fees for the use of their IP. And beginning in April of 2009, that's when the legal battles between Bethesda and Interplay started. And this would last all the way until January of 2012, when Bethesda would finally fully get the rights to the Fallout MMO as part of the settlement agreement. And even though it was canceled, tons of concept art still does exist, and that's what you've been seeing this entire time. Fallout Extreme. Fallout Extreme was a canceled squad-based first and third-person tactical action game set in the Fallout universe. It was planned to release with the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and was being developed by 14 East and had been published by Interplay Entertainment. The game's proposal was presented to Interplay in November of 2000, but was rejected and nothing ever really became of it. And for many years, it would stay hidden until it was leaked online in January of 2010. And according to the design documents, the game would have taken place almost a century after the Great War. The Brotherhood of Steel, the once silent organization, had been expanding and seizing more and more territory under its control. Their area of influence stretches as far as Alaska, where the new headquarters is now located. Their agenda leaves little room for the survival of radiation or FEV virus outbreak victims. Local humans are either drafted into their ranks as cannon fodder or enslaved, and mutants are outright eradicated. They are whom the player would oppose during the first half of the game. The player would control a squad of revolutionaries known as the Cause, and throughout the game they would gain more and more momentum, starting out in Oregon, marching their way through Washington, Canada, and eventually reaching Alaska. And eventually, after defeating the Brotherhood, you would learn why the Brotherhood set out to Canada and Alaska in the first place. The Cause must now venture out across the Bering Strait through Russia, Mongolia, and finally into China in order to disarm the Doomsday missiles that would obliterate what is left of the United States. And the endgame would take place in the Forbidden City where the Chinese Emperor resides. So they definitely had some big ideas with this, and honestly the storyline, I'm glad they really kind of never did anything with it, but it still sounds pretty cool. Hairy Deathclaws. Hairy Deathclaws are a set of Deathclaws that can be found in Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel. They would have been an entirely separate Deathclaw species living in various areas of the Midwestern states, mainly around the Illinois, Missouri, and Kansas areas. And one of these packs of hairy Deathclaws, the matriarch was captured by a psychic tribe known as the Beast Lords. While the tribals were able to use their psychic powers to control other animals, Deathclaws were proven to be too strong and resisted them. However, they cooperated with the Beast Lords in order to protect their mother. After the matriarch was freed by the Brotherhood of Steel, she led her pack to join the Brotherhood, and the elders surprisingly agreed. And she herself would volunteer her service, aptly named Mother. And unlike other Deathclaws, these ones are not reptiles and are considered mammals. They are covered in a thick layer of fur, providing them excellent protection against the elements, and are very easily distinguishable by the crest of 5 horns protruding from their skull and a single nasal horn. And probably the creepiest part is that at least some of them are able to mimic human speech. So imagine a giant hairy Deathclaw running at you and screaming die. It's probably worse than a regular Deathclaw. Pine Crest Cavern Giants. With the Far Harbor DLC, we got introduced to the location Pine Crest Cavern. And as you head into the cavern, you may notice on the center pillar a giant skeleton, and what seems to be an even smaller skeleton in both of its hands. And of course, you know the Fallout community, this is gonna spawn theory after theory. And with many cryptids being confirmed canon in the Fallout universe, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that giants, or maybe a Sasquatch like Bigfoot, is out there roaming around hunting down any normal humans it sees. True Jet Origins. I actually talked about this in a previous Iceberg, and I felt like I did a pretty good job explaining it, so I'm gonna let past me take this one. Community is in a constant back and forth over whether Jet was invented pre-war or if it was invented post-war by a character called Myron from Fallout 2. The people that say pre-war point out to the fact that in Fallout 2, if your character has max intelligence, you can kinda call Myron out on his BS and tell him that he didn't invent Jet, but he merely stumbled across it. And people also point out that Miss Bishop was exiled from Vault City because of her addiction to Jet. And also the fact that Jet can be found in numerous pre-war buildings that have not been touched since the bombs fell, give the impression that Jet was a pre-war drug. But people on Myron's side point out to the fact that Chris Avlon, who was a game designer for Fallout 2, posted in the Fallout Bible 9 that Miss Bishop's claim of being hooked on Jet could be due to her memories being warped by drug abuse. And when Josh Sawyer was asked why can't Jet be found in pre-war pharmacies in Fallout New Vegas, he responded, "Why would Jet be in abandoned pharmacies? It was invented after the war. Myron invented Jet."
Why wasn't there Jet in any of the abandoned pharmacies in New Vegas?
Why would Jet be an abandoned pharmacy as it was invented after the war? Myron invented Jet.
So it would seem that Myron invented Jet, but the fact that you can find Jet in a lot of pre-war areas that have yet to be looted does kind of give a little bit of leeway to the fact that Jet was a pre-war drug, but differed from its post-war drug, and then Myron was able to develop a different version of Jet. So I guess yes, Jet was pre-war, but it was just a different version. Dead Money Evil Ending. So I'm just now noticing that I already talked about this in a previous entry, but yes, there is an evil ending for Dead Money. If you have a negative enough reputation with the NCR, you can bring it up with Father Elijah, and you and him can team up to take over the Mojave with the Cloud. and that is the exact same ending slide that I showed you earlier. Fallout 3 Cryolator. Now when you hear Cryolator, you might think Fallout 4, and you would be right, but did you know that there is a cut weapon called the Cryolator also in Fallout 3? The Cryolator was going to be a homemade energy weapon, and it appears that several junk items that were also cut from the game would have been used in it. And even though it never officially made it into the game, we still do have its model and tons of concept art. Siding with the Fiends. Now I think this might be talking about the plethora of cut content that the Fiends did have in Fallout New Vegas. There's tons of cut content like cut people and cut locations, cut audio for Violet, Nephi, and Cook, and even some cut ending slides and some possibly cut buying and selling of slaves. There is way too much for me to talk about in this video, so I will link a video by Triangle City down below in the description. Check it out. There is 11 minutes of Fiends cut content that you're definitely going to want to watch. Patroclus of the Montana Brotherhood. Patroclus was the Brotherhood of Steel Elder for the Montana bunker. The only reference that we have to this bunker is during Fallout 3. While they are eating their meals, Elder Lyons will speak to the entire Brotherhood, quoting the words of Elder Patroclus. Brothers, as we take our meal this day, let us reflect upon the words of Elder Patroclus of the Montana bunker. It is in service of steel and guardianship of one's brothers that each man finds his purpose. My friends, stand with your brothers, guard them, guide them, and each find them purpose. Look around this table, my brothers. Look into the eyes of each man and woman seated here today. Pledge into your hearts and minds, pledge by your guns that you will stand with them in battle until the end. Trust each one of them with your life, and earn the trust of each in turn. Eat well, my friends. But unfortunately, due to a bug, this is actually never heard during normal gameplay. Boone in Fallout Tactics. This is a reference to Boone's voice actor, Jason Marsden, who has voice acted for a couple Fallout characters in the past. In Fallout 2, you have Myron, in Fallout Tactics, you have Horace and Hassan, and in Fallout New Vegas, you of course have Craig Boone. So, is Boone in Fallout Tactics? Of course not, but it sounds like it.
Well, looky here. I don't recall giving out invites to Brotherhood of Steel dogs. I bet my boss will give me all the promotion and props I need after I bring him some Brotherhood slaves. Let's see what you trained monkeys can show little old Horace.
The mysterious stranger is an Eldritch entity. This one took a little bit of digging, but I actually found it. This would explain how the mysterious stranger has been able to be pretty much all over the world for a pretty long time. How he's able to father a kid and have that kid go to New Vegas, while also making his way all the way to the Commonwealth and to DC. He's pretty much just a god. And if you don't believe me, this is from the official Fallout 3 game guide. The mysterious stranger, faction Wastelander, location random. You have a guardian angel, but with a deadly hand cannon instead of wings. Meet the mysterious stranger. An odd and eldritch entity said to appear and aid you in combat before you draw your dying breath. Of course, it helps to have the mysterious stranger perk first. So whether you want to believe that he is some eldritch god or just a helpful passerby, that's up to you, but I'm just saying eldritch entity, man, makes a lot of sense. Fallout 76 is a simulation. This is a pretty interesting theory that has spread around, and the theory goes that Fallout 76 isn't actually canon, so to say, and that everything that happens in Fallout 76 is just inside of a simulation. This would explain majority of things that happen in 76 that would kind of break the established lore. I mean, how else would you explain people constantly nuking each other in one section of Appalachia? And thank you to a video called Fallout 76 is a Simulation by Tonic, and in this video he goes over 3 pieces of evidence. Number 1, on one of the computers there is this note. Secretary Eckhart, please, you need to listen to me. None of the other members will take me seriously, but I believe this is of utmost importance. We are slaves, Mr. Secretary. I've been running some tests, and I believe I've stumbled upon what I believe to be conclusive evidence that we are trapped, playing someone else's game. Virtual strategic solutions game, that is. Everything around you, Mr. Secretary, is a simulation, a projection onto your mind. VSS has trapped us in here, and it is up to us to break free. The key to our escape, I believe, lies in a small town that we perceive to be in China. It's the link to VSS's external network. If we destroy it, it will shut down the simulation and I believe finally be free. I cannot tell you why exactly we've been imprisoned. Perhaps this is a test by the upper ranks to make us earn our way into their good graces. Perhaps VSS has trapped us in here to prevent the Enclave from stopping whatever nefarious acts they're currently visiting upon the world in our absence. But we must do something, Mr. Secretary. To fail to act is to give up the only thing that makes us men, our freedom. Also, some wall writing that says nothing is real can be found in multiple locations. And the last thing he goes over is that the date never changes, despite the date obviously supposed to be changing with these seasonal events. And the fact that the date is the day that the bombs dropped, well, not the year, but the actual day and month. So he speculates that this is all hinting towards Fallout 76 being a simulation. Nobark Noonan is the Chosen One. I have also talked about this in a previous Iceberg, so I'm going to let past me come back and retell it, because again, I think it did a great job. Nobark Noonan from Novak was actually the Chosen One from Fallout 2. And the evidence that people give is actually a little compelling. The ages of the two actually do add up. The Chosen One is around 20 years old during Fallout 2, and New Vegas takes place 40 years later. So that would make the Chosen One around 60 years old, and Nobark is fairly old. He could easily be that age. One of the bigger pieces of evidence is that the Chosen One's car can actually be found outside of Novak. In Fallout 2, you could actually get a car that would allow you to fast travel a lot faster, and it was called the Highwayman. And it just so happened that in Fallout New Vegas, next to Novak, there is a location called Wrecked Highwayman. And when you discover it, you hear the Highwayman theme from Fallout 2. And it's no coincidence that Nobark lives in Novak, and this Wrecked Highwayman is right outside of Novak. One other piece of evidence is that you can find the gun, that gun, inside of the Dinosaur. You can either buy it and or politely steal it. And even Josh Sawyer himself says that the name is derived from the fact that many players refer to the 223 pistol in Fallout 1 and 2 as that gun. Next, Nobark actually says some things that appear a little scuffed when you just look at it at face value, but when you actually dig into it, it might make a little sense. At one point, he talks about cave rats, which is pretty interesting because in Fallout 2, you can actually run into some cave rats.
Ghouls, I tell you. Religious ghouls in rockets looking for a land to call their own. Don't you laugh at me. I know a spell that'll make you show your true form. Cave rat taught it to me.
So is Nobark the Chosen One? I'd like to think so, but at the end of the day, who fucking knows? Dinosaur footprints. The dinosaur footprint is actually the giant footprint, which is a special encounter in Fallout 1. You can't come across a giant footprint with the remains of a male peasant, well, the goo of a male peasant stuck in the middle of it, with a stealth boy also inside of the goo. And if you have the companion Taika with you, he will say, yeah, I'd stay the hell away from whatever made that. Seriously, I've never seen anything like that. I think our best option is to move on fast. Fallout Shelter Online. So everybody probably knows about Fallout Shelter, but did you know about Fallout Shelter Online? It's exactly what it sounds like, except for the fact that you cannot play it. Well, you can, but you'd have to go to a Discord and follow a certain set of instructions, because the game, as of now, is only available in Asia. Why is it only available in Asia? No idea. It's probably because of the Chinese company that maybe owns the rights to it, but as of now, Fallout Shelter Online is not available in the US. Exodus. Exodus was a 2008 post-apocalyptic role-playing game developed and published by Glutton Creeper Games. The game was originally going to be set in the Fallout universe, but due to legal complications with the original creator of Fallout, and also Fallout's current copyright holder, Bethesda, the license for the property was revoked. They did end up with a final release product, but it excludes all of the references to Fallout, even though it still does retain its post-apocalyptic theme and a lot of its common elements with the Fallout setting. So if you've ever wanted to play a role-playing game about Fallout, check it out. Abe and Monty. Abe and Monty is short for Abraham and of course Monty, who are what appear to be ghouls with an accelerator item. We know about these because of some early dialogue options that you can have with Veronica. Abraham wanted to say goodbye, and that he's gone, north, into ghoul country.
I guess he was lost a long time ago.
even at the end. Still, thanks for bringing word. At least now I know.
Abe explained what happened in the crater, how it healed him.
Unlikely. He was a little too focused on gears and diodes. Tech was the cure-all.
What did you expect a ghoul to say?
Yeah. Thought as much. He'd been fading away for a long time.
Here's the accelerator.
Where did you get this?
I found the ghoul with the accelerator you were looking for.
You did? Where? Oh my god, I mean, I thought... I don't even know what I thought might have happened to him. But you don't have a "this is good news" expression on your face.
I had to kill Monty for it.
You killed him? But...
I trapped Monty in a subway tunnel. That ghoul's not coming back.
Trapped him? Where? And I don't like saying this, but the Mojave's safer with him... there.
Now, if those lines sound very familiar, that is because they should be. These are the lines that you would hear after the events of Dead Money when talking to Veronica. There was never actually a ghoul called Abe and Monty. These were just placeholder lines as to not spoil the plot and the outcome of Dead Money. Voice acting cost a lot of money to rent out the voice actor and to rent out the studio, so they tend to record all the lines in one go. So to not allude to any of the DLCs or not spoil anything, they purposefully used different placeholders so people wouldn't figure it out. But it would be cool one day if they did have a reference in some game to Abraham and Monty. Fallout 2 causes Fallout 1. This is a reference to a special encounter in Fallout 2 that is called the Guardian of Forever. The Guardian is a giant ancient-looking time portal which allows the Chosen One to travel back in time before the start of the original Fallout, and maybe break the water chip that's in Vault 13. You know, the water chip that was the sole reason for the Vault Dweller leaving Vault 13. And after you have broken the water chip, a little notice will read, the vault has maybe 100 to 150 days left of water. This comforts you for some reason. So because of this special encounter, many theories of time travel have been spouted out, but if this special encounter is to be taken as canon, I guess in a weird way, yeah, Fallout 2 did cause Fallout 1. And if you were wondering what this is a reference to, because everything in Fallout is a reference, this is a reference to Star Trek, the episode The City on the Edge of Forever, in which a portal named the Guardian of Forever teleports Kirk and Spock to New York in the 1920s. Underwater Vault. The Underwater Vault is a reference to Vault 120, which was a cut vault in Fallout 4 that was located just off the coast of Massachusetts. And going to the vault, you would have very quickly noticed that it was heavily inspired by BioShock. And the best part about the vault was that a giant squid would have been the vault's overseer. The vault would have been a part of the quest 20 Leagues Under the Sea, in which you would have had to join forces with Captain Zal and sail the submarine over to Vault 120. You would have exited the submarine by the forward torpedo tube together with Zal. And as you get inside the vault and continue to explore, you would have eventually come across a bunch of survivors. And eventually going further into the vault, you would have had to have crossed the seafloor, where a suit of power armor would have been waiting if you didn't already have one. And this would have brought you to the research center, where you would have discovered the grim remains of all of the marine experiments that they were doing. And then you would approach the final confrontation with the giant squid as the overseer, and you then would have decided if you wanted to release it into the wild or keep it trapped in Vault 120. And I think this would have been a really freaking cool vault, especially if it was like heavily inspired by BioShock, so I'm kind of upset that they cut this. The Interloper. The Interloper, or also known as the Firstborn of the Wood, is yet another horror cryptid found in Fallout 76. Located in the Lucky Hole Mine and worshipped by the people of the Cult of the Mothman, not too much is really known about the Interloper, other than what Jeff can give us.
There are other things in this world now that cannot be explained. The end of the world has awoken. Something. We all know the Mothman is out there, stalking and watching us, but what of the unseen? There are things we can only glimpse in our minds. Great entities beyond our comprehension. The Mothman is a creature more like us than the unknowable horrors in the peripheral vision of our subconscious minds. No longer just a false memory now. I have heard a tale of this entity made real, deep in the earth.
The storyteller was mad by any reckoning, but his story, no less true. My name is Jeff Lane, and I will lay bare this Watcher. No matter how deep I must go, I will come to know the true nature of the interloper. The interloper is here. I can feel it clearly. Last night, in visions more real than the senses, it called to me, and I go to it now. Signs are all around that I am not the only one to hear the call, though where they have failed, I will not, for it summons me alone in the end. Before I go deeper, for the truth revealed changes all. By its very nature, let it be known, in this world, the interloper has chosen Jeff Lane as the conduit of the unknowable. Together, the hidden reality becomes manifest at long last.
But after recording that tape, Jeff is never heard from again. There are plenty of great videos out there that go like 30 minutes way into detail about the interloper and the cult of the Mothman and the dark worship of this creature, so make sure to check it out if you're into stuff like that. Again, I can't spend 30 minutes talking about one cryptid, but in the description, I will link you guys a video that I thought was pretty interesting and gave off a lot of good information about the interloper. Fallout 2, Pop Rocks, and Nuka-Cola. Pop Rocks were originally going to appear in Fallout 2. They would have appeared in the Environmental Protection Agency building, but that was also cut as well. And the interesting thing about the Pop Rocks is if you consumed Pop Rocks and Nuka-Cola at the same time, that would have caused your character to explode. That myth stems as far back as I can remember, and was something that parents would tell their kids that if they ate Pop Rocks and drank a soda at the same time, their stomach would explode. And the urban legend goes that the fictional character Little Mikey, played by John Gilchrist, who was the little kid that promoted Quaker Oats' breakfast cereal Life. And for a pretty long time, he was the subject of the urban legend that he died after consuming Pop Rocks and Coke, which supposedly caused a fatal stomach rupture. And you'd be surprised to know that John is very much still alive, but the legend became so widespread that his mother actually received a phone call from another woman to offer her condolences. Like I said, man, Fallout and their references, they know no end. Fallout 2 Tool Art. In Fallout 1 and 2, there are many posters of Mater James Keenan from the band Tool that can be found in multiple buildings. The poster is a part of the album art from the band's first album, Undertow, which was released in 1993. Now this band and everything was before my time, and I'm not that old, I'm not that much of a boomer, so I know nothing more about this art and or the band Tool, so I guess that's where we can move on. Vault 11 Survivor Candidates. Vault 11 was a vault in Fallout New Vegas that has one of the most infamous stories behind it. Vault 11 in and of itself was just a giant social experiment. After the blast doors were sealed shut, the inhabitants were informed by the vault computer that they would have to sacrifice one vault dweller every year or else everybody in the vault would be killed. And this was all just a ruse. If they were to refuse, a message from Vault-Tec would play commending the vault dwellers on their right choice.
Congratulations, citizens of Vault 11. You have made the decision not to sacrifice one of your own. You can walk with your head held high, knowing that your commitment to human life is a shining example to us all. And to make that feeling of pride even sweeter, I have some exciting news. Despite what you were led to believe, the population of Vault 11 is not going to be exterminated for its disobedience. Instead, the mechanism to open the main vault door has now been enabled, and you can come and go at your leisure. But not so fast. Be sure to check with your overseer to find out if it's safe to leave. Here at Vault-Tec, your safety is our #1 priority.
But it didn't turn out like that, and it took quite a long time for them to discover this. The Vault Dwellers eventually settled on making the choice of sacrifice through elections, where whoever was elected as Overseer at the end of their term would be sacrificed to quote-unquote save the rest of the Vault. And again, there's a lot more information that I'm just glossing over, so if you want to learn more about Vault 11, I will leave yet another video in the description, because there is just so much more that I can't talk about in this video. But at the end, there were only 5 people left when the vault doors were actually opened. And through this holotape, we can summarize that at least one person survived.
Are we really gonna do this? It's open. We could just leave.
I couldn't. Not after that.
We don't deserve to leave. A shining example. That's what it called us. But we were. We did what we were supposed to. Not by a long shot. Anybody would have done what we did.
You ask me? That's exactly the problem. Now let's get on with this.
I'll go first. Wait. People should know what happened. They could learn from it. If there's anyone out there at all, I hope they never have to find out. Ready, Harry? Yeah. No, wait!
And of course, when you have a mystery like this, that's not going to stop the Fallout community from coming up with some wild theories on who exactly the survivor was. There were many lore discussions actually being argued that it could be No Bark, it could be a super mutant, it could be a ghoul, but the answer in of itself is kind of depressing. There actually was going to be a Vault-11 survivor that was cut from the game. Not too much is known other than his voice actor would have been Peter Renaday, and this is what he would have looked like. So I guess the answer to who survived Vault-11 is this jabroni. Volpes Inculta is just a really bad spy. This is actually pretty funny because if you look at it, he kind of is. If we first take a look at his stats, he really doesn't have anything that would help him stand out as being a spy. His tag skills are guns, science, and unarmed. He doesn't even have sneak. And if we look at his special stats, his charisma to talk his way out of anything isn't even that high. And probably the thing that really nails it in the head is this quote that Arcade can give you upon meeting him after exiting the Tops.
So, Mr. House doesn't care that one of Caesar's most notorious Legion spies is walking around on the Strip. Either that or his Securitron's AI is too primitive to recognize the threat. Neither answer is particularly comforting.
So it seems like everybody in the world knows about the supposed best spy that the Legion has, which is not a good thing. I feel like if you're a spy, you don't want to be known. You don't want everybody to know that you're some incredible Legion spy. It would be better if no one knew of you. And the fact that House was betting on the fact that you would go back to the fort makes it seem that he knew this was Volpes and that he knew Volpes was going to come up to you. Because why else would you let him on the Strip unless he was doing exactly what you wanted to do? And the fact that Arcade knows him, everybody just apparently knows Volpes. This guy really, really sucks at his job. Vault Boy and Pip Boy. Of course, since it's Fallout, there's going to be some pretty interesting lore behind the Vault Boy. The Vault Boy was first introduced in the original Fallout in 1997, and was actually unnamed, even though the game's instruction manual did refer to him as the Vault Man. He was created by Leonard Boyarsky, who originally thought of him as the quote-unquote skill guy, and partially based him off the rich Uncle Pennybags from Monopoly. And when it came to Fallout 2, Brian Menz was responsible for all of the Vault Boy images drawn, and he also did it for New Vegas. But when it comes to the 2001 spin-off Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel, Micro Forte confused Vault Boy with the Pip Boy. And Micro Forte's choice of name change would actually be continued by Chris Avellone when he developed and published the Fallout Bible in 2002. But have no fear, Boyarsky would clarify in an interview in 2004 that the Vault Boy was always intended to be the character's name, while the Pip Boy is supposed to be the little guy on your Pip Boy interface, which is based off the Bob's Big Boy mascot. I always came up with the idea / design for the Vault Boy and the cards, as I called them, showing him doing all the different things in humorous ways. By the way, he's not the Pip Boy. The Pip Boy is the little guy on your Pip Boy interface. The Vault Boy was supposed to evoke the feel of Monopoly cards, and the Pip Boy was based on the Bob's Big Boy mascot. And Tim Kaine has also stated that the Pip Boy is the yellow and red caped character on your Pip Boy device. And Bethesda with Fallout 3 would go on to confirm the name of Vault Boy for the mascot. So no matter what it is involving Fallout, you know there's going to be some very interesting lore behind it. Talking Deathclaw genocide planned by Chris Avellone. So we briefly touched on the Talking Deathclaws earlier in this list, but let's talk more about the behind the scenes, and why we really never saw too much of them. In the spirit of the Fallout Bible, Chris Avellone published the Fallout Apocrypha, in which he would just answer questions from the community. And one of the questions was, "Geez, why do you hate talking Deathclaws?" And he responded, "I don't hate talking Deathclaws. I hate what they represent." Now, before you misinterpret that as me actually hating talking Deathclaws, I don't. In the context of Fallout and what it means for player actions, I absolutely do. And he was not the only one that really kind of despised talking Deathclaws. For the 25th anniversary of Fallout, a bunch of the original developers did a roundtable where they answered questions. And one of the questions was, talking about limits. What's something either of you don't ever want to see in Fallout, or something you could remove from Fallout like it never existed? And for the answer, Tim Kaine said this: "I am not a fan of talking Deathclaws. They were meant to be the biggest, baddest, scariest thing ever, not librarians." In which Leonard Boyarsky responded, "Hear, hear." But when asking the creator of the talking Deathclaws, John Dealey, he says this: "One day I was walking down the hallway and I saw Fergus in one of the programmer's office, and I saw the screen over the programmer's shoulder, and it was Vault 13. I went in there and I said, 'What's going on?' They said, 'Oh well, we've decided to eliminate this area from the game, but we don't want to just not include it. So the Enclave is going to kill them all off.' And that was that. They didn't come to me and let me know. They didn't ask me about it. They just behind my back did it." And he says the reason Chris Avallone didn't want them in there was for quote-unquote being too silly. And Dealey's response was, "I mean, you've got super mutants and ghouls. Why not have something that can stand up to the super mutants?" So the whole lore and the behind-the-scenes drama of the Talking Deathclaws is rather interesting. Nuka-Cola addiction. In multiple Fallout games, you can become addicted to Nuka-Cola. In Fallout Tactics, it was called Nuka-Cola addiction. In the original Fallout, it was just called Nuka-Cola craving, and in Fallout 2, it was called Nuka-Cola reliance. And not really much happens other than the fact that you crave another Nuka-Cola. The Cat Vault. I believe this is a reference to Vault 43, which is only ever mentioned in the webcomic One Man in a Crate of Puppets. We really don't know too much about Vault 43, other than the social experiment that went on there. The experiment was pretty dumb. The population consisted of only 20 men, 10 women, and a panther for some reason. I can only imagine how well that turned out. Bloodmen. Bloodmen were the original name for ghouls during the development of the first Fallout back in 1997, and some inspiration for the early ghouls can be from Forbidden Planet, I Am Legend, and real-life accounts of radiation poisoning victims. And I'm really glad they went with the term ghouls instead of bloodmen. Bloodmen just sounds too weird. Doesn't really roll off the tongue like ghouls does. Mikey Frazier founded the White Glove Society. This is a theory that I see get brought up every now and then. It doesn't really have any basis and doesn't really make much sense when it comes to the timelines, but still, that's not going to stop people from posing this idea every now and then. The theory goes like this. Back in Fallout 1, there was a man known as Bob Frazier who ran Bob's Iguanas, and one of his hidden ingredients in these iguanas was human meat. And the theory goes that his son continued the transition and marched his way out east towards New Vegas, and would eventually found the tribe that became the White Glove Society. There really is no evidence to support this whatsoever, and it's just one of those fan theories that people come up with every now and then to try to explain cannibalism and the likes. And it would make for a pretty interesting theory, but none of the timelines add up at all. Enclave bases in Raven Rock, NORAD, SAC, Iron Mountain, and Mount Weather. This is just a pretty interesting bit of lore that shows you that the Enclave might have a lot more bases than we know of. In Fallout 2, PoseidoNet, which was a pre-war transcontinental network operated by Poseidon Energy, and it stretched all the way from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Post-war, it was used by the Enclave to communicate between its facilities scattered all across the American waste. And like I said, in Fallout 2, PoseidoNet mentions that Iron Mountain, NORAD, and SAC are all offline. So these bases all could have fallen during the Great War, could have fell due to time, lack of manpower, or maybe there's another hidden threat out there that we don't know about yet. But what we do know is that we probably haven't seen the last of the Enclave. Deathclaws are Terrask. This was a pretty interesting little lore rabbit hole, but if you do not know what Tarisk are, they are actually from Dungeons & Dragons. And according to the Fallout Bible and Scott Campbell, Deathclaws were modeled visually on the Tarisk from Dungeons & Dragons after a D&D game made by Interplay was cancelled, and this is according to the Fallout Bible. Or, according to Scott Campbell, after the creature was cut from Planscape Torment. The quote from Scott Campbell goes like this: "Was it always a big scaly lizard thing? No, my initial design for this terrible creature was an apex predator of the wasteland, a mix of Wolverine and brown bear, mutated by the FEV. It could survive any environment and feared nothing. A legendary force of nature that struck terror into the hearts of men. Unfortunately, the artist took one look at my concept sketch and said, dude, that's way too much hair." It was true. The Wolverine bear was very furry, and there was just no way around it. So here's what happened. The newly formed Black Isles started working on what would be Planscape Torment. One of the first art pieces was a monstrous creature called a Tarisk. It was sculpted in clay and was then, point by painstakingly point, digitized into a 3D model. As Planscape moved forward, it turned out that the Tarisk wouldn't actually be a feature in its design, leaving that nasty model in disuse. Thus, the furry Wolverine bear became a hairless reptilian biped. Or if Chris Taylor, the lead designer, is to be believed, while they do look like Tarisk, it was not intentionally, and the clay model was supposed to be a Deathclaw from the start. Now, whether you want to believe Scott Campbell, the Fallout Bible, or Chris Taylor is up to you, but I definitely don't think it's too far-fetched to say it was at least inspired by it. Fallout Tactics Klingons. In Fallout Tactics, there is a melee weapon that you can get called the Dak Targ, and its in-game description is weapon constructed for a bunch of obsessed TV fans in the 20th century. It works like a real weapon, which is very sad. And this is a reference to a Klingon dagger with a very similar name that first appeared in the 1984 film Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. The Visitors. The Visitor is a deceased creature that can be found in the Appalachia in Fallout 76. It closely resembles the interloper that we have previously talked about, and in the same cave you can find a holotape called President's Eyes Only.
This here is James Addison of the White Spring Resort staff. I tell you, they never thought I was telling the truth, but I found it. I swear by all that is holy, I found it. I knew it was there all along. Okay. See? It started with the rumbling. We had some minor earthquakes. You heard me right. Earthquakes of all things in this neck of the woods. I knew something wasn't right. I was gonna prove them all wrong. All the other people at the resort just laughing at me. Well, who's laughing now? I just discovered a fucking underground spaceship and the rocket fuel leaking off of that thing. Hell, it's making even the rocks glow. I gotta tell the president. If it's the last thing I do. I'll be an American hero. Get the Medal of Honor, I bet. All right, enough talking. Time to swim back home to glory and to wiping that damn smirk off Robbie's face. James out.
So maybe James Addison is onto something, or this is just yet another mutated creature that happened to meet its end in the waste. No romance in New Vegas. You might have noticed that you really can't romance anybody in Fallout New Vegas. You can sleep around if you want, but you can't romance any of your companions, even if there is an end slide about Cass that kind of alludes to it.
Cass survived to see the NCR flag flying proud over Hoover Dam, and thought for a moment, this is what a hero must feel like. She was about to tell the courier not to get too proud of himself. Then she figured, he knew that already. That night, Cass kicked in the door of his room to celebrate, only to find the man on the bed was an NCR soldier whose barracks had been destroyed. He was cute, though, so after having her way with him, she got the hell out, leaving an empty whiskey bottle as a note. As she walked along the dam in the night, she felt drunk, content, and happy to be alive. Which to her was the whole point of it all.
And to top that off, in the development of Fallout New Vegas, there was some ideas that were being tossed around where you would wake up drunk and wed to her. You would have been married by the king, with the proceedings being an Elvis song. So with all the hints of romance, why did we never see any? And that's just because Chris Avallone didn't really want it to happen. And to quote him on Twitter, "I can definitely say I am not against romance. In games, even if I'm terrible at writing them. And the romances." So maybe we never saw it because Chris Abalone just doesn't think he can really write a compelling romance story. The Fallout Tactics Shosha. This would have been considered a big gun class in Fallout Tactics, and the official description would have read, "Renowned as the worst machine gun ever issued to any army at any time in history." And the name for the gun, even in the editor, would have been Useless Heavy. And this is a reference to the real-world French-made Showshot light machine gun. During World War I, it was pretty known to be unreliable and constantly jamming, and it's just a tale as old as time. Poor design choices and rough conditions. I mean, not too many guns can really hold up with the muddy conditions of World War I trenches. Betsy the Playable Brahmin. Betsy would have been a multiplayer character that could have been recruited in Fallout Tactics for 564 game points. And although we never got to see her in Fallout Tactics, she almost made an appearance in Fallout New Vegas. She would have appeared as a standard water Brahmin with the cut character Kevin Hargrove, and she probably would have been somewhere located around Freeside's North Gate. And she would have been some sort of companion, with a couple partially complete dialogue options like, "Betsy, I need to go on by myself. Are you going to be okay, girl?" And "Come on, girl, let's get going." So maybe one day, Betsy the Brahmin will finally make her appearance. Radioactive Tumbleweeds. An interesting piece of cut content would have been the radioactive tumbleweeds in Fallout New Vegas. It would have emitted radiation similar to a glowing one and would have technically been classified as a creature. And it would constantly be moving under its own power and have the option to be killed. But unfortunately, this version of the Wind Brahmin never got to see its final debut. Vault 111 scientists were the variables. There is an interesting theory that the true experiment of Vault 111 was not the cryostasis chambers, but instead was to see how the scientist would react with having no orders, limited food supply, and being divided into two different classes, scientists and guards. There really isn't much to back this theory up other than it kind of fills in a couple holes, especially with the Fallout TV show having recently come out. We now know that they really don't need to be doing experiments on cryostasis, especially when the TV show shows us that they pretty much have it under control. But instead, maybe Vault-Tec was doing a different kind of experiment and kind of threw them for a loop. And an interesting piece of headcanon that I made up is maybe what if Vault-Tec was trying to see if some pretty intelligent and resourceful people like scientists and guards would eventually turn to eating these same people that they were supposed to experiment and protect. I mean, with only so many supplies and no directive from Vault-Tec, what else were they supposed to do? Vaults were intended to prep for space travel. So the original plan for the Enclave was that they were prepping for space travel. They knew that nuclear war was gonna happen, it was only a matter of time. And to make sure that they all survived, they used Vault-Tec to create these vaults and run these experiments so that way they could get more information on the long-term effects of space travel. And it kinda does make a little sense when you look at a lot of these vaults and their experiments. Vault 11 was designed to see if people are willing to sacrifice one person for the collective good. Vault 12 was designed to test the effects of radiation on people. 15 was to see how different people of different ideologies would mix. 19 tested the effects of segregation on a community. Vault 68 and 69 had 999 men and 1 woman, and the reverse, to see the effects on a population that wasn't 50-50. And Vault 77 tested the effects of isolation on someone. And there are so many other more vaults that would definitely fit into this category of them trying to learn more about humanity, so that way when they eventually do go into space and try to colonize it, they won't run into any unforeseen problems. Now, with the new Fallout TV show, we kind of learned that this theory might start to die off, because with the TV show, we kind of learned the existence of the great game, and that everyone's searching for the long-term solution. But this theory still does hold some weight, and definitely does explain a lot about Fallout. Legion Slave Suicide Bombers. The Legion is not above using whatever means they can to completely demoralize their enemy. Talking to Ranger Andy in Novak, you can learn this bit of information.
A few years back, we get a tip that some Legion slavers were holed up in this burnt-out house a few clicks from where we were stationed. We get there and it's deserted. No sign anyone's been there. I mean, nothing. As we're leaving, I hear something behind me. I turn around and there's this kid, just skin and bone, and he's looking up at us and he's scared half to death. Been hiding in a closet. I go to grab him out of there and I notice he's holding something in his hand. Something metal. He shuts himself back in the closet, and that's when I see the grenade he's left by my feet. They do it a lot, the Legion, using kids. They know we'll hesitate. Anyway, that was the first time. Second time, I fell down those stairs in front of the motel, just in case I got to thinking I'd put it all behind me.
Which would make sense to use kids in Fallout New Vegas, because if you try to kill a kid, they just get right back up. They can't physically die in New Vegas, so that's actually like high IQ play right there. Kale wacha nai conserva o. This is the exact line that Joshua says right before he puts a cap in General Gobbledygook.
Kale wacha ne conserva o. You understand me, don't you? Don't you?
And there really is no 100% definition on what this translates to. I think the only one who 100% knows what it means is Josh Sawyer. But that's not going to stop the community from trying to figure it out. And the Fallout New Vegas community kind of unanimously agrees that it stands for your extended warranty has run out. And if you really don't believe that, I guess you'll have to take the other definition, which is God/Caesar sees you but won't save you, which is actually a pretty hard line to say right before you put a cap in General Gobbledygook. First Battle of Hoover Dam, Legion Orgy. Now, you're not going to believe this one, but the first concept for the First Battle of Hoover Dam actually had the NCR launching a surprise attack on the Legion during their annual orgy. Now, this was not in Fallout New Vegas, this was actually back in Fallout Van Buren, and if you don't believe me, here's Chris Abalone saying it himself.
A little information about Caesar/Kaiser, what he was doing in the time, like both in history and the modern day sections of the campaign.
And if we were to read this image that is behind him as he is talking about Van Buren, it reads, Battle of Hoover Dam. This is the name given to the decisive battle against Caesar's Legion at Hoover Dam by the NCR 4th Cavalry Division. Taking advantage of a Saturnalia-style orgy in the slaver camp, the NCR forces, guided by intelligence obtained by the NCR Rangers, surrounded the camp, then moved in, killing dozens of drunken slavers as they attempted to defend themselves. This military action was welcomed by almost every settlement east of the Divide, and even other slaver bands, who were now able to move in on Caesar's territory. There are multiple mysterious strangers. Now, I'm not exactly sure why this one is so far down the list, because I feel like this is a very well-known theory, and the theory basically is exactly what it sounds like, that there's more than one mysterious stranger. That would explain why they all look very different and are essentially everywhere at once. I really couldn't find much else talking about this, so if you do know anything, please let me know down there below in the comments. Editing Rabbit here, this could also be talking about the Misfortune perk, which is also very similar to the Mysterious Stranger. Misfortune is a character that randomly appears in VATS to help you out when you have the Misfortune perk. Just when your enemies think they have the upper hand, Misfortune appears to turn their world upside down. And instead of her actually just killing people, she kinda does what her name suggests. She can knock them unconscious, she can break their weapons, and as the name suggests, just causes misfortune for your enemy. So maybe when it says multiple mysterious strangers, it's talking about other people similar to him? Again, I'm not sure. New Vegas Space Program. Ah, the classic New Vegas space program. This is the act of setting down a bunch of explosives and launching someone directly into outer space. There's not much more to it, it's just blowing shit up and it's awesome. Poseidon 18F chalk writings. So I believe this is just talking about the Poseidon energy chalk writings that you can find once you enter the actual Poseidon energy, not the 18F turbine one. Once you enter it, you can find a bunch of really weird chalk writings on the wall, a bunch of question marks with the name Glory written behind it, and a bunch of X's on a chalkboard. And to my knowledge, after scouring the internet, I don't think we have a 100% answer to what this all means. But I have seen a bunch of theories, and one of the theories that I really liked was that Glory was an ex-raider and she just lied about being a synth. And she did this so that way she could get out of the life, and she eventually went on to join the Railroad. And I've also seen people suggest that Cuddy, one of the raiders at the Poseidon Energy, might be a runaway / mind-wiped synth, since Institute synths can be seen attacking the plant. So maybe Glory knew Cuddy back in the Raider days and they have some history. If you know more about this, please let me know in the comments. I really couldn't find too much information about it. Fallout is a cosmic horror series. I feel like with each new game that we get, this is definitely becoming more and more true. When you look at all of the Bethesda Fallouts, you can notice that it seems with each Fallout, we're getting more and more Lovecraftian themes. In Fallout 3, you had the Dunwich building and Point Lookout. In Fallout 4, you had yet another Dunwich building and the Far Harbor DLC. And then with Fallout 76, you have a plethora of cryptids. So it does seem like with each new Fallout, we're falling more and more down the Lovecraftian love hole. That sounded really weird. That wasn't meant to come off as weird as it sounded. And I'm completely fine with that, as long as it doesn't become like too cosmic horror-y, but I really do like the small little nods and Easter eggs here and there. I think it definitely does make Fallout even more creepier. Dogmeat is the real protagonist. This is a pretty tongue-in-cheek theory that states that Dogmeat is actually the true hero of the series. He is an immortal dog that wanders the waste looking for companions to help survive. And along the way, he picks up the Vault Dweller, the Chosen One, the Wanderer, and they just so happen to get themselves involved in random shenanigans that has some pretty big outcomes for those areas. I mean, how else would you possibly explain that? Many people across the entirety of the United States all have a dog named Dogmeat. And I don't want you to bring facts and logic into this because this theory is sound when you don't do that, and I believe it. The Great Plains Dust Bowl. So when you think about the Great Plains in Fallout, there really isn't much known. I think the only mention we really have of this is in Fallout 2, where Cassidy will refer to it as one big radioactive dust bowl. So maybe with the next Fallout, we might get a little bit more lore on that whole area. But as of now, I think the closest thing we might actually have to knowing what's going on there would be Caesar's Legion holding up in Denver. Fallout 1 No Ending. This is actually pretty common of people that play Fallout 1 for the first time. They can get no ending. And the reason for this is because when they blow up the cathedral at the end, finally ending Master's reign, they never leave, and they end up dying in the result. And the game, instead of showing you all the cutscenes, would just fade right back to the menu because you died. And this led a lot of people to believe that there was no actual ending to the series, but no, you just actually have to get out of the explosion. You don't want to be in there when that goes off. The Brotherhood are a continuation of the Knights Templar. The Brotherhood have always kind of had this religious techno vibe to them. And according to Scott Campbell in the Origins of Fallout blog, he says, "I do love how these guys eventually turned out, but their origins were not very original. I simply wanted a group exactly like the monks from the Guardian Citadel in Wasteland. This was one of my favorite parts of the original game, an old, isolated stone fortress whose robed monks wielded insane energy weapons and would blast any trespassers. Fantastic. The Brotherhood was intentionally the same post-apocalyptic religious order that existed to keep the technologies of the old world alive. However, unlike the nihilistic Guardians of Wasteland, I really wanted the player to be able to befriend and join up with this group. And grab all of their awesome gear, of course. In keeping with the medieval monk theme, the Brotherhood become more of a knightly order with a distrust of outsiders rather than a coven of crazy zealots. Although this did make them similar in concepts in Gamma World, the Knights of Genetic Purity, and Warhammer 40k, the Imperial Tech Cults, I just love the idea of high-tech knights in power armor wielding vibro swords and Gatling lasers. Totally fan service to me. So the Brotherhood was originally planned to also be a religious organization centered around the worship of pre-war tech. This was directly inspired by A Canonical for Leibowitz, which was a post-apocalyptic sci-fi novel written back in 1959. And in the book, there was an order of monks who were preserving the remnants of man's scientific knowledge until the world was ready to use it again. So when you add up all that knowledge, yeah, the Brotherhood are kind of the modern-day Knights Templar with better technology. Mark is the mysterious stranger. This is actually a pretty interesting theory about the mysterious stranger, and out of all of the ones that we've talked about, I honestly think this one should be the real one. So if you don't know who Mark was, he was one of the original members of the expedition to the Mariposa military base, along with Richard Gray, Harold, and Francine. Francine would go on to be killed by the base's security robots. Harold would go on to be the same Harold that we know in Fallout 3 that has a tree growing out of his head. And Richard Gray would go on to become the Master. So Mark is the only one that we don't know what happened to. We do know that he was wounded and sent to the surface, but after that, we don't know what happened.
We mounted an expedition. God, Richard Gray led a small group of us up there. I can't remember the route or anything, but I am damn sure it was northwest, though. I think. Richard Gray was a doctor. A little older than me, and Fran was he smart. He found the source. Some sort of old military base. We lost a lot of folks getting in there. Robots and such, a lot of them. Damn surprised they was still running after all this time. What with the war and all. Whew, boy, they tore us a good one. We got pretty far inside. Wasn't a lot of us left by then. Gray, me, and a couple of others. One of them robots got Francine. Mark was wounded. Sent him back to the surface. Then it was just me and Gray. To this day, I don't know. He never made it back here, and, well, I couldn't face the wasteland again, so I never looked. We made it to some sort of central core, like a plant of some sort. That's when it happened. A robot crane crashed into us. Last I saw Gray, he was flying through the air and into some sort of acid bath. I was in bad shape and, well, I passed out.
We do know that Harold and Master went on to become some pretty powerful mutants, but Mark kind of just disappeared from history. I mean, if we kind of look at it like this, Harold would be the good one, the Master would be the evil one, and the mysterious stranger would be the neutral one. And there really isn't too much evidence to suggest that Mark is actually the mysterious stranger, but I mean, like, when you look at certain aspects of Fallout, there's always a good, evil, and neutral, and the fact that we don't know what happened to Mark when the other two people that were still alive down there ended up becoming some pretty prominent characters in Fallout, it kind of makes a little sense. Qualtoth. I feel like we've kind of talked enough about the Dunwich horrors in this video, so I'll make this one kind of quick. I'm not sure why it's this low on this list. But this is a mythical creature and revered as a supernatural entity by some in the Wasteland. In the Dunwich building in Fallout 3, you can find the Dunwich Obelisk, which is an altar dedicated to worshipping this being. And other than that, I feel like we've talked enough about the Dunwich and all their supernatural entities, so I will refer back to my previous entries and say go watch a dedicated video. There's just so much to talk about that it would make this video even longer than it already is. Mentats contain asbestos. This is very true. Next time you eat some orange Mentats, just remember you are also eating asbestos. In Fallout 4, if you were trying to make orange Mentats at the chemistry station, one of the ingredients is asbestos. And I believe this is only true for orange Mentats and none of the other ones. So I guess as long as you don't eat the orange ones, you're good, but I don't know. I would rather be safe than sorry. So I guess that is where we can finally end this video. I know it's been a long one, and thank you very, very much if you stuck through the entire thing. But I also have to thank my beloved Patreons a little bit more. We got Brian Hahn, Person, Dirty Dan, Fat Lucky Potato, Icy Storm, B-Rad the Man, Giovanni Diaz, Mayall, G-Daddy Smackdown, Org, Ty Mulan, and Henry Heiberg. Patreons get videos early and access to my Discord chat where they can berate me for when I get things wrong. If you'd like to be one, link is down there below in the description. And that is where I'm finally going to end it. Hopefully you guys have a great day. And that's it. Leave.